Hello, my dearest comrades. Israel has resumed its regular scheduled genocide after a shortly lived and violated pause. One of the largest unions in the country, the UAW, led by militant trade unionist Sean Fain, has called for a ceasefire. And many more interesting things have occurred in current events, all which we will be discussing today. And as always, feel free to shoot me any questions you have concerning philosophy. That's my field, so that would be appreciated. Or any other field, geopolitics, or whatever else you would like to ask us. So we'll get started with that and much more right after this.
Cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
All right, welcome. We have some folks in the chat. Hello, Victor. How are you doing? Hello, Dino. Hello, We Need Critical Thinking. The Statesian Bolshevik. Hello. Hello, Mikhail. Hello, Dust. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today we're going to be discussing very important things. It seems like every single day that passes, something very important arises. We'll be reacting to a famous 1979 lecture that Fidel gave at the United Nations. We'll be reacting to one of the videos. One of the videos we have prepared is a clip from an interview that I think Tucker did with Roseanne Barr, where they're talking about Julian Assange. And I think it's interesting to tease out some of the contradictions at play here with these figures that very clearly are part of the elite, but that sometimes they speak the truth. We have to explore that, see how we can re-articulate that and the people that listen to that towards a more positive and consistently anti-establishment direction. But we'll get started with what I consider to be one of the most important stories in our context, which is that the UAW, United Automobile Workers, recently were able to win a big for auto workers in the big three. So Stellantis, Ford, and General Motors, which, by the way, we're going to have the Institute's labor guy, Kyle Pettis, come on Sunday to break down the recent agreements that they were able to achieve and some of the other plans that they have now for organizing many of the automobile plants that haven't that are not currently unionized. But I wanted to speak about this today, which just happened today. Let me see how I can make this smaller. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. So this is a spokesperson from the UAW's international team, letting the people know that they have just called for a ceasefire. And I think the implications of this are huge, but let's break it down after we listen to what they have to say.
UAW International has voted to join the call for a ceasefire. The UAW International is calling for an immediate, permanent ceasefire in Israel and Palestine so that we can get to the work of building a lasting peace, building social justice, and building a community, a global community of solidarity. That is what we've committed ourselves to, and that is as important as anything else that we're doing in this country in order to ensure that workers and oppressed people and poor people across the world are on the path to winning the justice that they so deserve. So I'm here with you all. I'm proud to stand with our fellow union members from the postal workers, from UE. For so long, we've been silent and we've been ignorant in the labor movement to this issue. And that time is over. And I want to thank all the rank and file members who have made this happen. The UAW International has voted.
So there you go. I think that's tremendous. One of the things that we've been emphasizing from the start, whether it's in our discussions of protests and the fact that not all protests are equal. Some create disturbances for the people we should be trying to bring on board, and others create disturbances for the people we should actually disturb, the people financing and profiting off of the genocide of the Palestinian folks. But from the start, every time we've discussed this, we've been clear that the best route, I think, we have to pressure our government, which is the one financing and equipping Israel, it's the condition, the background that allows Israel to do what it's doing in Palestine, precisely because all Israel really is, as we've repeated, is a neo-colonial outpost of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East. But from the start, we've emphasized that the part of our society, the part of the American people that has the greatest capacity to push our elite to do something to stop this genocide is the working class, and specifically the industrial working class that unions like the UAW represent. These are folks that are working at the pressure points of capital. They're working in the points of society where the vast majority of surplus is created, and therefore where the basis of profit is realized. And this is tremendous. One of the things that we have seen, and one of the big faults of our labor movement in the past, is that it has fell into what the Marxist-Leninist tradition has called an aristocracy of labor, what before that Engels sometimes described as the bourgeoisification of the working class. And they have at times very clearly been okay with taking crumbs in order to look away from the things that our government is financing in other countries, and the crimes that we commit in other countries in the name of America and the American people and with American tax dollars. But it seems like that era is coming to an end. We've seen this new rise of labor militancy, and the UAW takes the form of Sean Fain, and a radical rank and file, and the Teamsters is taking the form of Sean O'Brien. It's taken the form in other parts of the labor movement that have created new unions, like the Starbucks union, like the Amazon Labor Union, led by Chris Smalls, who's someone that, at this point is basically a communist, So this transition, when you commit yourself to a militant unionism, remember what Lenin called unions, militant unions. They're schools of communism. So it's very hard to be actually on the side of working people in this country and not to realize sooner or later that the things that our empire does in our name are not only bad for working people around the globe, which we are naturally in solidarity with because they're part of our class, but it's also bad for us because it's American. It's the tax dollars of the American people that are used to fund the genocide, while our cities crumble, while our people, 60,000 of them, die every year because they don't have health insurance, or they have insufficient health insurance and can't pay the co-pays. So we can't disconnect the activities of the American empire to the crisis that we're finding in the American Republic, and specifically to the crisis of legitimacy. So I think this is a tremendous development, and it signifies, as the comrade there was saying, a shift in the direction of the labor movement towards a more conscious and explicit showing of solidarity with workers and peoples from around the world whose interest is fundamentally aligned with ours. That's one of the things that we've been reiterating from the start. I think it's the one thing that Marxists, specifically in the U.S., in the belly of the beast, in the heartland of the of the source of Israel's genocide, one of the things that we have to emphasize is that we're not supporting Palestine just out of the question of justice, just because every time we see these videos, our stomach turns. Yes, we're doing it for those reasons, but we also have to be clear, if we want to win new people over, that it is in their interest to go fight for Palestine. That when Palestine wins, they win. When Israel loses, because Israel is the embodiment of their class enemy in the Middle East, when they lose, their class enemy loses, and therefore they win. So drawing this connection between the anti-imperialist struggle and the struggle of our working class at home is absolutely fundamental. We've emphasized it from the beginning. And what we're seeing now is the fact that the contradictions have gotten to a point where it becomes evident for everyone in the militant labor movement that their solidarity has to be with the Palestinian people and their struggle against a genocide and a brutal apartheid society that has occupied them for the last 75 years. You can't say that you're on the side of working people if you turn a blind eye to a genocide of working people funded by your government and by the tax dollars of your people. So this is absolutely beautiful to see. And with that goes our first story of the day. The second one I wanted to touch is really the centerpiece for why we have titled the stream the way we have titled it, at least the first part, Israel has lost the information war, which is some of the clips that have came out from the hostages that were exchanged, the Israeli hostages taken by Hamas, the forces of liberation for the Palestinian people. And it's not a good look for Israel. And this is something that we've predicted, we've talked about basically from the start, and now we're seeing it in action. So let's react to this video from Jimmy Dore breaking down some of the things that we've seen and heard from the hostages, how they consider that Hamas treated them, and we'll expand it a little bit more after the Jimmy Dore video.
So here's an Israeli mother's letter to Hamas. Thank you for extraordinary humanity. This is real.
That's, by the way, one of the most important things that could be said, because the centerpiece for the ideological legitimation of what Israel is doing is the dehumanization of the Palestinian people. In other words, racism, right? Reducing a whole people's humanity to something inferior than where you yourself are at. And that's an epiphenomenal, so a derivatory effect of the capitalist system and embedded in the capitalist system, colonialism, neocolonialism, imperialism. It's a necessary component, or has been at the vast majority of the stages of that capitalism has gone through. It's been a necessary component to legitimize, to obtain the consent, to manufacture the consent of your people for the activities that the government is doing in their name abroad. The motives have always been rooted in political economy. They've always been economic. The excuses have almost always been, have almost always taken this form. They've almost always have had to otherize, dehumanize, degrade the people whom we are fighting against in the interest of our elite. But so that our people can consent to it, we have to convince them, manipulate them, make them think that those people over there, the people who in reality they have more in common with than the people trying to convince them that we should fight against them, that those people are not fully humans, that they're uncivilized, that they're terrorists, that they're human animals, that they're cockroaches, whatever it might be. Dehumanization is central. So when you have this up-close experience and you get to see the humanity of that other figure, it breaks through the narratives in ways which, just providing facts for what Israel is doing doesn't. you know. So let's keep this rolling.
This is real. Danielle Aloni and her daughter Amelia, 5, were held hostage by Hamas for 49 days in besieged Gaza. On November 24th, the Israeli mother and daughter were released as part of a temporary ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel and reunited with their relatives. Before they left Gaza, Danielle Aloni wrote a thank you letter to Hamas saying, "I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your extraordinary humanity shown towards my daughter, Amelia." Qassam Brigades, which is the armed wing of Hamas, shared the letter on its official Telegram account on November 27th. The letter was originally written in Hebrew and accompanied by an Arabic translation, along with a photograph of the Israeli mother and her daughter. In her handwritten letter in Hebrew, Danielle said, she, Amelia, acknowledges feelings like all of you are her friends. Not just friends, but truly beloved and good. And there it is. And here's the letter. Aloni acknowledged the good care given to the hostages.
Another part of what this shows, which is something that I don't think Jimmy gets at, is that, you know, it's interesting. Quite a few hostages have been released. I don't think I've seen any of them come out and do an interview where they're just lambasting Hamas and talking about how horrible their conditions were. The vast majority of them are being hidden from the cameras, and others who have been invited to meet with Netanyahu have rejected those invites. So what does that tell you? Do you think it just so happens that the people that Hamas were able to get hostage were the few Israelis that were not participant in this racist Zionism that is fundamentally supremacist and dehumanizing for anyone that's not part of their clique of the chosen ones? Do you think it just so happens that they ended up picking the more liberal and less racist parts of the Israeli population? Or was it the case that, as I think it's likely, the people whom they picked were probably an adequate representation of Israeli society, a society where people are socialized into perhaps the most egregious forms of false consciousness, things akin to the US South pre-1964 civil rights revolution. People who have been lied to over and over and over again to the point where they accept the most irrational explanations for things. And then these people, socialized in this environment, are forced to face for 50-something days the reality that everything that they have known is simply the shadows on the wall. The shadows on the wall of the cave. To go back to the great critic of ideology, Plato, in the 7th book of the Republic, you have these slaves that are chained. They're looking all their lives to a wall, and they see these shadows. And for them, they don't know anything else. For them, reality is those shadows. Until one of them breaks loose. They turn around and they see that there's these statues that have this fire lit behind them, and it is the movement of those statues that creates these images on the cave wall that they assume to be reality. Now, what happens when they break out? It takes a certain period of time for their eyes to adjust. You know, when your worldviews are broken, it happens suddenly, and it's a painful process. In the same way that when the slaves broke out, it was a painful process on their eyes. And then they escape the cave and they, you know, get a better understanding because they see out of the cave the animals that were represented by the statues, which were then represented by the shadows on the cave wall, which they assumed first was reality. So that's a similar position to where these Israelis are. These are people who have likely been as brainwashed into believing the shadows as everyone else in the Israeli population, or the vast majority of them. But it was probably a painful process of realizing the humanity of Hamas. Not just of regular Palestinian people, but of the group that they equate with ISIS and the worst forms of terrorism and anti-humanity activities. They saw it. It probably wasn't easy to go from I think Hamas are terrorists that rape babies and do all these horrible things, to they're treating my daughter as a queen. We see the humanity in them. There's another one that I'll show after Jimmy's clip that condemns Netanyahu for what Israel has done in Gaza. That transition was not easy. Listen to anyone who was a hardcore Zionist and changed their mind. It's not an easy transition. And it's one that most of these hostages made. And just like in the story of Plato's Cave, the slave that gets out, Plato says he's got the duty to come back and free the rest of the people tied up, seeing shadows as the only reality. But that when he comes back, they're not going to let him speak. They're going to try to kill him. They're going to think he's insane. So we'll see now, because the slaves have returned. They're not allowed to go in front of the camera. That will break the fundamental narrative that allows them to continue believing in these shadows. So we'll see what's going to happen now with these former hostages who have broken through the idea that is so fundamental for the Israeli apartheid project, which is the supremacy that they have and the dehumanization of the Palestinian people and all these other things that become ideologically necessary to justify what Israel's doing. We'll see now what happens to them, but hopefully we can get more testimonies from them so that the truth can come out to the light. Look, if they came out and said, Hamas treated us horribly, they raped us, they did X, Y, or Z, we'd be covering that too. We'd be covering whatever is the truth. That's what we should be committed to. We should be committed to the truth. That's, at least personally, as a philosopher, that's what my discipline entails. Philosophia, love of knowledge, of wisdom, of the truth. Commitment to always be on the side of the truth, to investigate it, regardless of whether it fits within your ideological narratives or it doesn't. It just so happened that our ideological position is the one that best understands the concrete world concretely, but the reality is not that. The reality is that they were able to see the humanity of Hamas, and a lot of them change the positions that they have been socialized to believe in order to give the thumbs up, in order to consent to one of the most heinous, or the most heinous state in the 21st century. Let's keep this rolling. Perhaps in competition with Ukraine, where there's people with literal swastikas walking around, but
is in Gaza and wrote, "Thank you for the many hours you spent as caregivers." She further stated her daughter has not only bonded with Hamas, but also felt like a queen. Children should not be in captivity, but thanks to you and other kind people we met along the way, my daughter felt like a queen in Gaza.
Let alone the fact that they saved them from the Hannibal Directive, which we talked about last time. The fact that Israel has this directive that says that if their soldiers are captured by the enemies, they have the right to bomb and to have the sort of operation that would kill those soldiers in the process. And what we saw in an event like October 7th, where a good number of the people killed were killed by the Israeli occupational forces, was the extension of the Hannibal Directive to civilians. It's not just soldiers if they get captured, it's civilians, which gets into the gray area because all civilians are supposed to be soldiers for a period of their life in Israel. But these were families that were saved from the Hannibal directives and the bombs coming from the sky on the part of their government that cares more about exterminating the Palestinian people than the lives of the Israelis themselves.
Aloni ended her letter with compassion for Hamas, stating, "I will remember your kind behavior shown in spite of the difficult situation you faced and the severe losses you suffered here in Gaza. I wish in this world we could truly be good friends," she wrote, and added her well wishes to Gazans. "I wish you all health and well-being, health and love to you and your family's children." Daniela and Amelia Aloni were among 24 Israeli hostages released by Hamas on November 24th. They were visiting Danielle's sister and her family at Kibbutz Nir Az in southern Israel before being taken hostage. An Israeli hostage turns around to give the Hamas soldier a handshake. unprompted. This man was keeping her hostage for over 2 weeks and allegedly raped and decapitated babies. She still gave him a handshake, unprovoked. Wow, Hamas really are sorcerers. So let's watch that.
It's okay, let's go. It's okay, let's go.
There she is.
You go with Islam?
Shalom.
Okay. You go with
Every hostage gave a handshake or waved to Hamas with a friendly smile when released. Why does the Israeli government forbid these people to talk to the press?
And they edited. There was a video of the two old ladies getting out of the van. The Israeli accounts that were posting it, they edited the part where the old lady looks and smiles at the Hamas individual. They edited that part out, and then they made it this whole thing of, oh my God, look at the fearless Israeli old ladies. You know, Israeli women are made out of a different material. You know, this more of this supremacist bullshit. Yeah, it's easy to walk out peacefully and then do the thing that you omitted from the posting of the video, which is turn around and smile at the people when they actually treat them as human beings and they're not these animals that the Israeli government paints them to be.
Hamas' primary intention was to get some hostages or to swap. So the reason why they got those hostages, so they could swap them to get people who were hostage in Israeli prisons, a lot of them children.
Yeah, exactly, Victor. Israel looking real bad every day. It gets worse. They were already losing the information war, but it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And as we've said here, no state, regardless of how fascistic it is, how to use a liberal favorite term, totalitarian, which is a term that I hate. It's created by Hannah Arendt in order to equate communism and fascism. And the book is called The Origins of Totalitarianism. It's funded by the State Department. But it doesn't matter how fascistic or totalitarian a state is. It needs a certain level of consent. So this is why the information war, which is another way of talking about maybe, you know, the war of positions between the imperialist forces and the anti-imperialist forces, or the ideological war. It's so important for them to win that war. They need to manufacture consent. And when that fails, it's a very dangerous situation for these states.
Here's the wave. See the wave? Everybody's waving. How does the Israeli army treat the Palestinians? Well, Israeli army beat us. Freed Palestinian boy narrates an ordeal in prison. Every week, the Israeli army, came to beat us. And they took all our clothes, bed coverings, and mattresses, says Osama Nayef Osama, who has been freed after spending 5 months in an Israeli detention. That sounds, I don't have a hard time believing that. So again, this is not turning out good for Israel. I don't know what they think is how this is going to end up. But if you thought anti-Semitism was a problem before this, oh boy. I'm surprised there hasn't been a world war over this already. I'm surprised that other Arab countries haven't just decided to go mental on Israel, because 95% of the protests around the world right now are pro-Palestinian and anti-Zionist. And Zionism is garbage. Zionism is akin to Nazism. We're doing live comedy shows, and
that's one of the things we've been saying all along, folks, that one of the biggest forces inflaming and in a certain indirect sense promoting anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish sentiments, because we can't forget the Palestinians are themselves Semites, is Israel. When you commit these crimes that are horrendous, that are hated by the whole global South and by the vast majority of people in the global North, in the imperialist countries, when you commit these crimes, and on every tank you have a flag with the Star of David on it, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that some people won't have the ability to be as nuanced to understand that you have to divide and separate the Jewish religion from what Israel, a, a state that functions as a colonial outpost of U.S. imperialism, does. And yet, where are the plethora of videos of people not being able to draw that distinction and just saying heinous anti-Semitic things? I haven't seen many. I've seen maybe a few, but so it's like the standard for behavior is so different. The Israelis can go out and tell someone asking for a ceasefire, Medea Benjamin, they can go up to her and tell her that they hope she gets raped and that they recorded and that, you know, that video sent to her mom, and they can talk about literally supporting a genocide explicitly, like wipe them out, eliminate them. These are things said by Israeli civilians in interviews, a plethora of them, many, many, many of them. They could say all that, nothing happens. Nothing happens. None of those videos are showed. But God forbid if one Palestinian said something even remotely near that concerning Jewish people. They've been talking about Hamas's charter for weeks as a charter that is akin to Mein Kampf and that wants to kill all of the Jews in the world, when it's explicit in that charter that their problem is with the Zionist state as an occupational apartheid state, that it has nothing to do with Jewish people, a good chunk of whom are anti-Zionist and against the state of Israel. So, again, they're losing the information war. Let me pull up another clip here connected to that. Israeli dancer Maya Bengi, held captive by Hamas, refused to meet Netanyahu, saying his hands were stained with the blood of Gaza's children. There you go. Ask yourself, why is it that these hostages aren't being put in front of a camera to talk about their experience? This is probably why. They saw the truth. They escaped the cave. And now they're very dangerous. They're a liability for the Israeli state. Don't be surprised if a few of them, especially the ones whose stomach was perhaps turned the most and want to speak out, end up somehow committing the you-know-what to themselves, and it's painted by the Israeli state as the result of the trauma that they suffered while they were under capture and held hostage by Hamas. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. Just like we shouldn't be surprised if they start doing things in the West, terrorist acts, and blaming them on Hamas, because the vast majority of regular people in the West are not in favor of what their governments are funding in Israel. So that's that. Okay, let's see. People forget that Haiti in its first years of independence had a highly racialized society in favor of black people as a result of being enslaved by white people. Yeah, that's a natural result. It's hard to ask for nuance, as you say, in the face of oppression, but we're still seeing that nuance. I haven't seen one interview with a Palestinian where they come out and say that they hate Jews and want to exterminate them. Their problem has always been, every time I listen to these, and we've been listening to them well before October 7th, their problem has always been with the apartheid state of Israel. So even the high standard that the Western media has put for them, they've consistently been well above it. The Palestinian people are such a tremendous inspiration for humanity. That's if you don't draw inspiration for your struggles from the Palestinian people, it's one of those struggles that the more you learn, the more it gives you faith in humanity. It is in the Palestinian people's struggle that you see the essence of humanity. It's a struggle for freedom, a struggle for decency, a struggle for democracy, a struggle against apartheid, against oppression, against blockades, against imperialism, against various forms of super exploitation. Because that's another part. There were before Israel kicked them out after October 7th, but there were around 100,000 or so Palestinian workers, specifically in the areas of construction in Israel, that were treated horrendous. So, Palestine is such a lighthouse of hope. It's endured what I don't think any people has endured in the century, and it's kept forward. It's kept its head up high, and it's said repeatedly, "Hasta la victoria siempre," until victory always. We're not going to stop. We're not going to stop until we tear this apartheid occupation down. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see. We have a couple questions here. Thank you so much, Comrade Battle Cossack, for the 20 Argentinian dollars and then 50 down here. These are tremendously appreciated, folks. As I've said often, it's a people's funded institute. We're not getting checks from China or from any benevolent billionaire. So this grassroots funding is tremendously appreciated. And we know most of our audience is working people. So when you can put some of what you've made while getting exploited to fund the People's Institute, it's tremendously appreciated by us. But Brzezinski or Kissinger, who was worse? Yeah, I don't know. I guess, directly, perhaps Kissinger. Indirectly, perhaps Brzezinski. But I think this brings up an important point. We've been popping the champagne for Kissinger's death for a few days now, and rightly so. I love going online and seeing that people from all sorts of different tendencies are celebrating the death of a war criminal, an agent, of a personification of American imperialism in the 20th and early 21st century. But we can never forget this. If Henry Kissinger would have never been born, there would have either been another Kissinger that would have played his role, or a group of people that would have played that role collectively. Henry Kissinger, all he did was fill a position that imperialism needed filled. So let's, celebrate the passing of this personification of imperialism and everything evil in the world. But let's not forget ever that the problem is the system. That whatever is uniquely evil or appears to be uniquely evil in someone like Kissinger is a result of what the system needed then and there. And I would say that the same thing goes for Brzezinski, Obama, Trump, Bush, all of these people. All they are is pawns, role fillers in a globalized system of capital extraction, of capital that's premised on the extraction of value from working people, and that is the most parasitic system humanity has seen in its currently most parasitic and destructive and cancerous form. So just wanted to say that. But Human Rights Watch keeps accusing China of cultural genocide. They always lower it. So they start with genocide and cultural genocide, and then they say, well, nothing's happened. While Israel is bombing Gaza, like they want to equate China with Israel. It's completely absurd, but you'll find that, we've been talking for a while about the two races that we have in front of us. That we have the sprint for a ceasefire, permanent ceasefire, and then the marathon for this longer anti-colonial struggle, the right of return of the Palestinian people, the establishment of a secular state, equal state. And sometimes, in order to fulfill the needs of the first sprint, we need as many numbers as we can. So if there's people that they premise their support for a ceasefire by condemning Hamas, we can criticize them. But if they're going to hit the streets for that specific race, they're on our side. We should tell the people around them, like, yo, be careful for this one, for these reasons. But in this specific race, they're running alongside us. And what I've seen from Human Rights Watch and others, other human rights group, is that they are calling out in a very mild form, but they are calling out and condemning what Israel is doing, and to some extent asking for a permanent ceasefire. So collab with them in that area, or not collab with them. Just if they're doing it right in that area, that's fine. But always keep in mind that a lot of these entities with terms like human rights or international this, international that, agency for this, a lot of these agencies are agencies of imperialism. Sometimes they vacillate and they decide to join if they wake up on the right side of the bed, the forces of humanity, and not support a genocide. But most of the time, that's not what they're all about. So just because they're doing this for Palestine doesn't mean that they're not going to try to lob in there some of the lies about China to play the role that they're playing and beating the tune of the new Cold War against China, which is, in my view, the most central, and not in my view, who the hell am I, but in the view of various people within the American establishment, the central enemy of the American empire. And I phrase it in this way: the American empire, not the American people. China could be the best friend the American people could have. China's enemy, the group for whom China is actually an enemy, a threat, is the elite. The same people that ruin our lives, that keep us poor and indebted. So it's them. It's not, China's not an enemy for us. But thank you so much again for those generous donations, Comrade Kozak. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Kissinger may have killed more people, but Brzezinski's effects on the Western left have been devastating for the movement as a whole. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I think not only the Western left, but the U.S. left has a role that I think is as important as any left around the world, because we live in the belly of the beast. If we bring down the heart of the imperialist system, that means that our brothers and sisters from the global south can develop their struggles peacefully. The biggest obstacles for the struggle for socialism at the world stage has been the role of U.S. imperialism. So if we can bring that down, which is one of the necessary conditions for establishing socialism, we're doing humanity a tremendous favor. Incredible testimony. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Who calls your captives friends? Yeah. Israel has been keeping a close eye on the released hostages and what they tell the world. Yes, they have. Okay, I got to catch up with a few of these. Let's see. Some of them are being imprisoned. Oh my God, I didn't know that. Send me any links you have to that, and we'll cover it on our next stream Sunday. I did not know some of them were being imprisoned. Okay. That's how I felt about the Queen, comrades. Thank you so much, Noah. Doherty. I'm so sorry. I'm probably butchering that. Marx favored a land value tax. Please discuss. Thanks. I don't think I can. I haven't read much in that area. You'd have to be perhaps a little bit more specific. Feel free to shoot me in the comments if you have a specific text that you have in mind. But one of the things that Marx is clear about, and I think this is one of the central flaws of people like Yanis Varoufakis, who in some areas he's definitely on our side, is that he thinks that just because we've had this shift, which we have, towards the main mechanism of profit obtaining being rents and interest and stock buybacks, and some of these which are very feudal means of profiting, especially rents, that we have entered a new mode of life, a new mode of production, which he calls techno-feudalism. Feudalism, but with the technology. And I think that's erroneous. That I don't think it's very much rooted in a Marxist analysis. Marx is very clear, especially in the latter volumes of Capital, Volume 3, and in other areas, specifically when he's talking about land and rents, which would include theories of surplus value as well. He's very clear that that this is not gone in capitalism, that it just ends up taking a new form from the form that it took in feudalism. And when you assume that this form of extracting profit, when it becomes primary, as it has in our era, if you assume that that means we've entered a new stage, that means I think that you have misunderstood how it is that we understand what a mode of production is. A mode of production includes within it many different ways of producing. It has a dominant one, and I would hold that even for the rents one, the dominant one is still the usual commodity production. There's never been in any mode of life just one mode of production. There's been the dominant mode of production, and that has given meaning, that has mediated how all the other different modes of production function. For instance, today I ate at a worker co-op. Is the worker co-op as a mode of production the same as a capitalist factory? No. Some people like Richard Wolff will say that worker cooperatives are socialism. It's a different mode of production. It's democracy at work. I don't know if I'd label it that, but it's a mode of production different from the dominant capitalist mode of production, but within the confines of how capitalism functions, because it's existing in this specific system, it takes the determinate form that what ends up happening is that these cooperative companies still have to try to obtain profit, and then what ends up happening is that those profits, some of them are reinvested to be used as capital, and some of it are distributed amongst the worker producer owners. Co-ops function differently in other societies because it's an institutional form of production that ends up reacting and taking shape in specific modes of life. And the differences that you see from a co-op under socialism and a co-op under capitalism are rooted in the fact that the central mode of production is different. And so the auxiliary modes of productions that exist within the mode of life as a whole end up taking shape in ways that are mediated by that dominant one. So of course we have, rents still, but it's rents within the context of capitalism, a capitalism that has achieved, because of its degeneration, an extremely parasitical state, and that is, I believe, on the tail ends of its lifespan. But thank you so much, Noah, for the $2 super chat. Carlos looks like that. That's not true. I look like I'm closer to Peso Pluma sometimes. If I take off the beard, maybe Peso Pluma. Let's see. Excellent. Love the name. Penis Dragger. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. If you think Kissinger was bad, you got to check out the world system, which found him useful. I'm not sure what you're trying to refer to. If some of the things I've seen online is people claiming that because Xi Jinping spoke kind words of Kissinger or Putin did, that means that we shouldn't be critiquing. Most people within the establishment call Kissinger a realist, a sort of 19th century political realist. Okay, That doesn't mean he wasn't the agent that represented capital in the most heinous atrocities that we've seen in the second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. So the ones now are perhaps worse. That doesn't mean that we can't celebrate the fact that this criminal, this enemy of humanity, is gone. It means that we have to fight against not just him but others. And yeah, we should use the fact that his imperialist realism has been a little bit more rational with regards to now China and Russia. We should use that as a way of saying, these people are so bad. Joe Biden and the DNC and the GOP, they're so fucking bad that even the arch war criminal or the figure of Henry Kissinger, universally hated by most of humanity, even Henry Kissinger looks in some areas good in comparison to them. That doesn't mean we absolve Kissinger or say that he was good or celebrate it or prevent ourselves from celebrating his death. He was a criminal. But the role he plays socially as the people that represent capital and the elite that play an essential role for the reproduction of the current order, that system has made it so that the people that occupy Kissinger-like roles are worse than Kissinger, simply because the system is at a more advanced, more degenerative, more moribund stage. That shouldn't prevent us, however, from criticizing the shit out of Kissinger. Okay. Meaning that he is a symptom as much as a special... Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mentioned that before. I don't know if you were in the stream then, but it's mistaken to overemphasize the individual part of it. If there wouldn't have been a Kissinger, or if Kissinger wouldn't have been, there would have had to be a Kissinger either way. Either in the form of one person that played the role of Kissinger, or a group of people that collectively ended up doing what Kissinger did. All Kissinger did was fill a role. He filled a role for a system that is premised on the destruction, as Marx said, of its two sources of values, the working class and nature. So, okay. Well, let's go to our next story. Let's see, which one do I want to do? I'll do this one. Since we've been talking about the hostages, here's an interview with the Thailand's hostage negotiator with Hamas, and they are pressing the shit out of this man so that he speaks negatively about Hamas, and he doesn't break. So, I congratulate him. I give him a round of applause. He did a great job in this interview, and it shows that, look, it's not just the the very explicit anti-imperialist camp or the Muslim world that is very clearly not on the side of Israel. It's countries like this whose hostage negotiators are unwilling to condemn the forces that the Palestinian people have chosen to represent them in an armed struggle against their occupiers. Okay, so let's give this a watch.
Have you heard from the Thai hostages that have been released? And if so, what have they said about their experience in Gaza?
คือผมไม่ได้พูดคุยนะฮะเพราะว่าทาง
I didn't speak to them. They're not allowed to speak with anyone outside their families until 48 hours after their release. But they've all told their families they were well taken care of, well looked after, given shelter, clothes, food and water, and given mental support.
What were you told by Hamas about the conditions that the Thai hostages were being held under?
คือผมได้รับทราบตลอดเลยนะครับตั้งแต่ครั้งแรกที่มีการพูดคุยว่า
Hamas told me they were prisoners of war, that they mostly lived in tunnels, but some stayed in the refugee camps, some stayed in houses.
Do you think the Thai hostages were being treated differently to the Israeli hostages?
ผมคิดว่าการดูแลตัวประกันทั้งหมด
No, I think Hamas kept the same standard because they follow Islamic law, especially protecting children.
Your group said early on that the Thai hostages were being looked after Why were you so confident that was the case?
เพราะที่เราไปพูดคุยนะครับกับทางฮามาสเนี่ยผมได้
Our group talked to Hamas 5 times as representatives of the Thai House Speaker and leader of Shia Muslims in Thailand. On every negotiation, they confirmed to us that the Thais were captured as war prisoners and would always be treated according to the Quran and Islamic law. So I was confident Hamas would take care of the Thai workers. And you could see in the workers who were released, they had good interactions with Hamas.
เจรจาและพูดคุยกับฮามาสเนี่ย
Is this just all part of a deal that's been done with Hamas? They release Thai citizens and the hostages have to all say they were treated well.
ไม่มีครับฮามาสไม่ได้พูดอะไรเกี่ยวกับเรื่อง
When we negotiated with Hamas, they didn't give any requests or conditions for release. They just said,
She's basically asking him, like, did they force you to say what you're saying right now in order to get the hostages? This is so ridiculous, but he's fucking hitting it out of the park.
that the Thai hostages would be freed when there's a ceasefire.
But Hamas did kill at least 39 Thai citizens.
คือจากจำนวนตัวเลขที่รัฐบาลไทย
39 Thais were killed, that's for sure. But we don't know where or how. It's a war.
It is indisputable that families were murdered by Hamas on October the 7th. Why did you feel
That's how you can tell that they know how shaky their facts are, because they're questioned just a little bit. They're questioned just a little bit, and the standard just keeps going down. Well, they killed 39 Thais. Well, maybe we can't prove that, but they killed someone. They killed some families. So if this is what leads me to think that a lot of these people, especially the ones that go in front of a camera and are the agents of creating consent, the people that the ideologues in charge of, manufacturing consent for these things. It leads me to believe that a lot of these people know what's going on, but are just lying for the sake of their paycheck and rising up the ranks. It's not an issue of ignorance. I don't think for a lot of these people, perhaps for like the vast majority of the population, when they fall into these ideas, perhaps it's a question of ignorance there, but ignorance. It's not a question of ignorance because she's standing there reiterating these lies. And as soon as he asks he replies very simply, it hasn't been confirmed. Did she say, no, it has? Look, here's where it has been confirmed. Here's the evidence behind the claim that I'm making here that is structuring how people are going to understand the interview. Here's the evidence. No, instead of doing that, she makes the standard of the claim that she's making even lower. Well, they might have not killed 39 Thais, but they killed someone. So it's very easy to see, though. It's very easy to spot. And anyone half competent realizes what they're doing.
so sure that they would protect hostages?
คือวันที่ฆ่าวันแรกนะครับวันที่ฆ่าวันแรก
Definitely, it is a war. There was killing on both sides. But the main point of Hamas going there was to capture hostages and to use them for deals to help the Palestinians.
Just to be clear, you're not denying that Hamas killed Israeli civilians, are you?
คือผมยืนยันตามคำแถลงของฮามาส
According to Hamas, they only wanted to kill Israeli soldiers, not civilians.
Are you sympathetic with Hamas's cause, and do you think that's in part why you've been able to negotiate the release of Thai citizens?
คือถ้าถามว่าผม
I'm sympathetic to the truth. Everything you fucking asked me, all I did was state the facts back to you, and you had to go to something new because you knew what you said was baseless. And then because I'm sympathetic to the truth, because I want the things said in this interview, in this dialogue, to be on the basis of what actual facts we have, because that's the position I take, then you ask me if I'm sympathetic with Hamas. That's the last straw. Well, we couldn't defend any of the absurd claims that we made. So let's say that this person, who all he's done is stated facts and questioned the falsities that I have put on the table, let's compare him, or let's associate him and his image with the people whom we have caricatured into being the equivalent of ISIS, the equivalent of Hitler. Character assassination. If nothing works, if he doesn't go along with your lies, if he questions your lies, there's always the good old character assassination via the association of him with Hamas through the consideration that he's a supporter of Hamas or sympathetic with Hamas. It's absurd.
ผมเห็นใจหรือเปล่านะฮะผมก็ต้องเห็นใจพี่น้องชาว
I sympathize with the Palestinian people. After more and more wars, their land was taken, and eventually Palestinians were refugees and made second-class citizens. You don't have to be a Muslim to have sympathy for Palestinians.
ชาวปาเลสไตน์
Why do you think you've been more successful than other nations like the Americans in negotiations?
ผมคิดว่าผมไม่ใช่นักการเมือง
I don't know. Maybe because the whole fucking reason why Israel exists and does what it does is to fulfill the interest of America in the Middle East. Just a thought, just some food for thought. Oh my God.
We went there to negotiate as normal people, not politicians. Hamas saw this. They saw us.
Oh my God, you're killing me, Watts. But surely Hamas is mixing their recyclables with non-recyclables. Yeah, they're doing that thing that that the West and the US does where they give you a trash can and the lid is divided in half, and then this side is recyclables, this side is non-recyclables, but when you throw it down, it's all the same garbage and it all goes to the same place. That's what Hamas is doing. That's what we have to wage a genocide against the people of Gaza.
Us as Thai Muslims. We were people, not politicians. Hamas.
Like the Americans in negotiations.
ผมคิดว่าผมไม่ใช่นักการเมือง
We went there to negotiate as normal people, not politicians. Hamas saw this. They saw us as Thai Muslims. We were civilians, and that's why they decided to release the Thais. They promised that if there was a ceasefire, Thai people would be released in the first group. Now we can obviously see Thais are among the first citizens to be released compared to 20 other nationalities.
You went with a small group to Iran to have talks. We know Iran helps to fund Hamas. How critical do you think Iran was in helping to free Thai citizens?
คือผมยอมรับว่านะครับว่าหลังจากที่เราไปเจรจากับฮามาสโดยตรงผมขอเรียนอย่างนี้ก่อนว่า
I'd like to thank Iran, both the government and the people who have been supportive in negotiating with Hamas. They know Thailand has good relations with the.
This isn't me saying it. I'm not just pulling this out of my ass. Joe Biden himself has said repeatedly, if there wasn't an Israel, we would have to create one. Even RFK, who is very close to some of the most fascistic Zionists in the US, part of the Israeli lobby, he has said it explicitly. We covered it in one of the interviews that he did. The strategic, necessary role that Israel plays for the US in the Middle East. The whole Israeli project, the construction of Israel, was a project of British and American imperialism. That is factual. There's no getting around that. And the people from the State Department themselves admit that they need Israel. That they've shown this. Israel and as Merschmeyer has put it, Israel and the U.S. are tied at the hip. They're basically the same entity. That's what a colonial outpost is.
Islamic world and Iran. We spoke with so many high-ranking Iranian people. The highest ordered the Iranian foreign minister to negotiate with Hamas to help us.
What about the remaining hostages? How confident are you that they will be released and when?
ผมหวังว่าตัวประกันไทยจะได้รับการปล่อยตัวเนี่ย
I hope they will be released in the coming days. But Hamas would like the Thai people and the Thai authorities to hear this message. The border area is disputed land and it's wartime, and Hamas will consider anyone who works there is working for the outlaws.
มากกว่า
They say they won't have time to look at the nationalities or passports of people on the land, but Hamas say it is okay to work in other parts of Israel.
Do you think that Hamas was justified in taking hostages from Israel?
คือจะถามว่ามีความชอบธรรมไหมต้องบอกว่ามีความชอบธรรม
Yes, because there are more than 6,000 Palestinians captured in the past and their families can't visit them. No one heard their cries. The world didn't hear their cries. That's why Hamas had to do this, to get the world's attention focused on Israel's treatment of the Palestinians.
There it is. The truth. Why did Hamas take hostages? Because there's thousands of hostages that have been held for years by the Israeli state. Shit, you can consider Gaza and the West Bank, but Gaza specifically, which has been described by Human Rights Watch and UN organizations as an open-air prison, by high-ranking Israeli officials themselves as a concentration camp. That's been confirmed by the UN, that the Palestinian people exist in an apartheid state. you can consider them in some form hostages. Norman Finkelstein, one of the most prominent anti-Zionist Jewish scholars out of the U.S., he can say every time they ask him about the hostages and the hostage exchange, he says, yes, well, let's exchange the 2.3 million people in Gaza who are held hostage. Of course, they're blocked. They have nowhere to go. It's an open-air prison. It's somewhere from an open-air prison to a concentration camp. Those are the two terms that scholars frequently go to in order to describe the conditions at Gaza. Those are prisoners. So, but even excluding that, there's still tens of thousands of Palestinian people, a lot of children, held as prisoners, hostage, by Israel. So no one was batting an eye. Nothing was being done about them. None of them were being released. So Hamas understood it was necessary for them to have some leverage in the form of hostages so that they could have some of those people released. And sorry to break it to you, it worked. So that's all this man is saying. That's pretty cool to see that at least some representative of states actually have some commitment to the truth. Thank you so much, Team Orca, for becoming a 2-month member. Thank you so much, brother or sister. I don't know. I see you have Comrade Kim on the profile, so I'm guessing brother. But anyways, Marx is dope. Yes, he's the dopest. He's up there chilling. Where is he? There he is. And I'll reiterate something with Marx that we said earlier with the figure of Kissinger. Marx just happened to be the one person in his time, along with Engels, we can't forget Engels, who was able to, thanks to the methodology that he developed, dialectical materialism, understand the capitalist mode of life systematically, concretely, and understand the foundations of the systems, the contradictions that drive it, and that make it so that within the system itself, you have the potential for a new world. And from the anatomy, as he says in Der Grundrisse, from the anatomy of our study of capitalism, we've been able to analyze the anatomy of other previous societies retrospectively and understand them better in light of what this more developed society looks like. In the same way that out of the anatomy of the human, you have more insights into the anatomy of the ape. That's the analogy that Marx provides. But had it not been Marx that discovered this, someone else would have. Someone else would have. We should move away from the, this great man of history thesis, and realize that, certain historical individuals are produced by history and by the concrete conditions that created them. And it could have been someone else that discovered the same thing. Someone would have. It just so happened that it was Marx, and yeah, we should celebrate him and Engels for it. But just like someone else would have taken Kissinger's role, eventually someone would have been able to write Capital. Okay, let's see what else we have here in the chat. Hello, Comrade Marius has joined us. Hello, Comrade. How are you doing? Greetings, Comrade Sam Dixon. Sam Dixon was, or has been, one of the consistent students of the Institute's Marxism schools. He was in my class on Marxism and the History of Western Philosophy. He was in Noah's Basics of Marxism class. He's been in both of the classes that Professor Danny Shaw has led. The first one on the history of various revolutions, and then now the one he's leading on Palestine. And Sam was also, he turned from student to teacher a while back. He was able to do a presentation on the history of the PFLP, and that's very special to see, because that's really what we're trying to accomplish with our education. We want to create organizers. We want to create educators. We want you to be active with this information. Don't just hold it for yourself. Don't just develop yourself and that's it. Develop yourself so you can serve humanity, so you can convince your coworkers, so you can speak to the folks in your communities, and your various social associations, your book clubs, and your bowling clubs, and your softball leagues, and all these other different things. But yeah, thank you so much, Sam, for joining us. Marx was writing Capital in his later works at the peak of the Victorian period, the peak of British imperialism. He moved to London to study it properly and write his works. Yeah, he has a very famous quote from the preface to the first volume of Capital, where he says that Britain shows for other countries the trajectory that they will have, precisely because Britain was the most advanced the most advanced capitalist country in the world. That quote was wrong, or partially wrong, because the way that capital's expansion, the form that it's taken, has not been one where the same way that capital developed in Europe, it develops the same way in the global South. No. What has happened, and this is where we need that Marxism-Leninism, this is where we need Lenin's analysis as an extension of Marxism via keeping the method and extending the conclusions to a new concrete reality. When capitalism goes abroad in the form of imperialism, the dominance of finance capital, the export not of commodities but of capital, it makes other countries poor. It keeps other countries poor. It doesn't create the conditions that Marx thought, where it was just it's just going to replicate what happened in Britain and in India or something. It keeps them poor and underdeveloped, and in a condition where it's just imperialism is just extracting resources, producing things very cheaply, and accumulating capital like they're unable to do in the metropole, in the heart of the empire. So that's an analysis that Lenin develops. Marx, towards the end of his life, develops something akin to that, especially in the contact that he enters with various ethnographers, various anthropologists, but he doesn't publish anything on it. I've been able to read the manuscripts and secondary literature on the manuscripts, but he never in his time publishes on it. So I think it's fair to say that it's Lenin, the first person, that draws those conclusions out. But there's a rational side to that. There's a part of it which is true, in the form of a statement from Nikolai Chernyshevsky, the Russian left-wing populist, who wrote a book, What Is to Be Done? That's where Lenin takes the title from, but who Marx loved. Marx was even considering translating Chernyshevsky in order to spread his works. Marx loved Chernyshevsky. And Chernyshevsky had a phrase, which is that history gives to its sons the bone, and to its grandchildren the marrow. Something along those lines. It's a beautiful quote. And the essence of it is that the best part of history is given to the civilizations which, while history is entering a new era, develop last. Those are the ones that develop the quickest, because they don't need to, say, develop the steam engine on their own. Once it's been developed in Europe, you can just say, "Oh, cool, that's that's it." Now we have it. So certain forms of development happen quicker and easier once development has already occurred in one place. And there's some truth to that. Of course, we have intellectual property laws and the enforcement via imperialism and neocolonialism of a condition of dependency on the global South, where all they're allowed to be is low technology producers. But you have situations like China, where because it's led by a communist party, and because it was able to ride the tiger out, the famous Chinese expression goes, it made a conscious effort of the four modernizations, first enumerated by Zhao Enlai. Development of sciences, technologies, securities, agriculture, and production. So I was able to consciously produce this eating of the marrow, as Chernyshevsky would say. Okay. Bogdanov lost the battle, but he won the theoretical war. Yeah, that's oof. That's a very interesting statement. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll say what was said. I believe by Zhao Enlai about the French Revolution. It's still too early to tell. We'll see. But thank you so much for the $5 donation. As I've mentioned, it's a people's funded institute, so these are tremendously appreciated. Thank you so much, brother. Kissinger was an unusually self-aware reactionary and had a serious understanding of geopolitics. Yeah, he was a cold, calculating figure, which in some cases made him a bit more rational. In other cases, not so much. Okay. Yellow like Parenti. I love it. I love the name. Parenti's yellow lectures are a must. I've often said that if we establish socialism soon enough, the Parenti yellow lecture is going to be what kids are shown, kind of like in elementary and middle school, where there was one day where you were just shown a video and they would bring in the projector and they would be showing a specific movie or a documentary or something. We're going to be doing that, but with Parenti lectures, and the yellow lecture is going to be one of the key ones. On a somewhat related note, thoughts on structural versus instrumental Marxism. Love your work, brother. Thank you so much, comrade, and thank you for the $5 super chat. I'm not sure what you mean by instrumental Marxism. Structural Marxism develops out of the French theorist, the structuralist. Specifically, the figure of Althusser is one of the centerpieces there. And although I think that Althusser, there's some work in Althusser that's quite interesting. His book on Lenin, his early work for Marx, is interesting to read. I had a short-lived phase where I just tried to read everything I could from Althusser in English. And I really enjoyed reading it, even though I deeply disagreed with it. I'm someone who is very much entrenched in the idea that Hegel is very beneficiary for our understanding of Marxism and for our transformation from just accepting the terms and using them here and there to a transformation of worldview. There's a difference between someone like saying, I'm a communist, I'm going to put the hammer and sickle in my bio and throw out terms here and there that are within the Marxian tradition, and then someone who actually engages with the world with a Marxian dialectical materialist outlook. I have found that, at least in my case, and I think it's in the case of others, look at Lenin, the transition before and after 1914, reading Hegel's fundamental. So someone like Althusser, who's trying to divorce Hegel or Marx from Hegel, who's also trying to divorce the more humanistic sensibilities of the early Marx from the later Marx, as if you can just, cut Marx up into nice little slices. I very much disagree with that. I still think he's someone who, in his ways, brilliant. I like his work on ideology. I don't appreciate the concept that he develops at the end of the essay on ideological, the ISAs and the RSAs. Has been a few years since I read it. Ideological structural apparatuses and forget what the other one is. But what's up, brother? I love the shirt.
That's good, brother.
But for Althusser, he's not dialectical enough. It's the same comment that I always reiterate from that Engels letter. What all these men lack is dialectics. He's insufficiently dialectical. So that's the problem I have with him and with structural Marxism. On the whole, there's some stuff that's helpful, the work on ideology, but for that, Gramsci is, in my view, much superior. How you doing, brother?
Good. Enjoying what you were building on and just the emotions, man. I mean, I remember you hit me up like 6-7 weeks ago, and we were feeling a lot of emotions over Palestine and Gaza, and I was just having these kind of existential questions, like, are we becoming numbed? Somebody in Atlanta self-immolated themselves, just like the Buddhist who burnt himself in protest of the Vietnam War in Ho Chi Minh City, which was in colonial times called Saigon. Yeah, somebody burned themselves in protest in the South. I mean, imagine the powerlessness that they could. And I wanted to go through some of the propaganda. I'll follow your lead. Luis Althusser, did he ever go to a demonstration?
I think a few. He was part of the PCF, the Communist Party of France. Yeah, he was a supporter of the Soviet Union. A lot of the French communists were, like Sartre and others, but yeah, a lot of flaws. Sazi, should I read Adorno's Negative Dialectics? I would say if you're a scholar, if you're in the field of philosophy, sure. I read a ton of stuff that has nothing to do with what I consider to be the correct worldview. But if it's not the sort of thing you should be doing at an organizer's book club. What you're going to get out of it is not, I think, the correct dialectical materialist analysis. Thank you so much for another $2 super chat here, Sazi. Pavlov and behaviorism for Marxism, yay or nay? I'd say nay. It's too one-sided. I think that's part of the problem that develops in the mid to late 30s Soviet Union, because quite a bit of the scientists were part of the collaborate efforts to attempt to, basically coup the existing government. Some of the scientists that came to the fore, and people like Lysenko, were not the creme de la creme of what the Soviet Union had produced in terms of scientists in the late 20s and early 30s. And that's unfortunate. But yeah, I consider Pavlov's work to be quite one-sided, which means you can draw insights of it if you're able to recontextualize it, and take the rational kernel and think through it dialectically, not be one-sided in your analysis as well. UAW calling for a ceasefire is a heartening development. Absolutely. This was the first segment, by the way. So if you don't hear us talking about it, it's because it's the first thing. It's the first thing we covered. But
Yeah, I mean, it's only us that can stop it. What the U.S. ruling class wants is an excuse to bomb Iran, principally. Back into the Stone Age. I want to show you all some headlines. I think one of the first things I do every morning, and this is what the Black Panthers and the Young Lords and the American Indian movement taught, every morning, 2 hours reading the enemy's newspapers, seeing what the mouthpieces of the working class, both in their liberal expression and in their most reactionary, openly fascist expression, what are they saying? So let's go right to the source. The number one newspaper in Israel attack near Damascus. They see that's they put here Israel Hamas war, but it's Israel taking on the entire Middle East and committing a genocide in Gaza war. This is the language of genocide, and it's like fireworks. They do whatever they want in Lebanon, in Iraq. It's the US's pit bull on a short leash. A multi-layered trauma is affecting Israelis in the wake of October 7th. It's infectious. I mean, multiply that at the level of a society by 2.3 million, and they may be able to learn some empathy. While war rages in Gaza, Israeli troops and settlers grow trigger happy in Ramallah. Well, that's Gideon Levy. Gideon Levy is, if you haven't read and studied Gideon Levy, he is maybe the Bernie Sanders of Israeli journalism. He definitely has, huge flaws. We're not going to agree with him completely. But within the Israeli political spectrum, like, they've definitely tried to get rid of him so many times. So he's the truest expression of a critical but liberal leftist tendencies, but far, far short of anything like our Marxist anti-imperialist worldview. Renewal of Gaza fighting, fighting. It's a wrestling match. It's fencing. Heightens fear and anger for Israeli hostages' families. War in Gaza, Netanyahu is busy badgering the media. So there's some critique, certainly, of Netanyahu. That's perhaps one of our hopes, that there's some type of liberal rebellion against Netanyahu. I mean, one thing that's come up for me, and as I speak, Carlos, I don't know if this has happened to you, but like, when can we say genocide? When can we say Holocaust? Like, I just posted something on Twitter that reflects our worldview. Am I going to be fired tomorrow? And it's a destabilizing feeling. I'm not belly aching. I'm not a victim. I'm just trying to keep it like emotionally real. So I brought something. You want to comment first? I got something for you. I sent it to you on Signal, and I saw that you were busy. But I want to play something that I think the audience.
Yeah, no, I was talking earlier that especially now with the hostage thing, some of the fabric that's keeping Israeli society ideologically together is going to begin to tear, and we should celebrate that, because at the end of the day, Israel's still a state that requires the consent of its people. A lot of that is rooted in the dehumanization of the Palestinians. And when you see how it was that the hostages were treated by the Palestinians, the reaction of the hostages, I don't think any of whom have been allowed to go in front of a camera yet, that dehumanization narrative is broken. The reality is presented to them. And earlier I was drawing some analogies with the allegory of the cave. But yeah, what was it you wanted to show me, brother?
I'll show in a second. There's some great comments here. Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think that's a zip code, area code. No, for sure. Israel's not a monolith. We actually want to do a program or a class. We should report back on the class last night. No, of course, Brian, thank you. The segmentation, the stratification along class lines, along settler lines, there's incredible variation. I didn't mean to imply that Israel's a monolith. I mean, there's a lot of emotions, a lot of frustration. But of course, what Carlos articulates, to see this disintegration of a white supremacist manifest destiny, settler society is what we work for. Just being on the defensive so much, being on the defensive. We did a big conference this week in New York City, and oh my God, we had to have like a whole inner struggle just to see if we could record it and we couldn't take pictures, and they gotta make sure no one's even recording voices, because look, they put me and Carlos on a truck and drive around Harvard saying, that me and Carlos gonna handle that, you know? But like, yo, these are 18-year-old, 22-year-old, like, you know, their spiritual worldview is one of humility, and they've been forced to you know, step up in a historic way. And I was speaking, and I'd use the word Holocaust and genocide and extermination campaign, and like half the crowd has lived this for the past 75 years in their flesh. A young crowd, but you know, their families. But in the crowd, there were a lot of new people because different Latino organizations co-sponsored, and they also went to you know, different Black community organizations, and some rejected it, and that's kind of the. I got a bombshell for Carlos, man. I want to see if Carlos faints on this joint. I'm gonna keep building it. I'm gonna keep hyping it up. Let me see if there's another comment. So thanks to Brian again.
I wanted to address this one from Blady. Yesterday, I guess you mean a couple of days ago now. When you mentioned the notion of the event and philosophy, I was immediately reminded of the cave analogy by Plato. What's your take on that? Yeah, absolutely. There's, I would say, two events in the slave that escapes the first chains. Once he escapes the first chains, he sees the statues and the fire behind them that's projecting the shadows, and then the second event is when he steps out, and each event is painful. That's an important component of it that's often left out in the analysis. Making these breaks, having these events, they literally shatter your everydayness, the quotidian character of your life, and that's not easy. That means that if you have fidelity to that event, you can often destroy your former self, your aspirations, your assumptions, some of your connections, all these different things. So, yeah, there's two. I would say there's two key events in that allegory of the cave, and conjoined with the event is that pain of the ideological rupture. Do you want to show me the?
Yeah, for sure. I'm getting there. Well, I'm getting there, but I love what some of the comrades are putting here. What would you call 900,000 Jews being expelled from Muslim majority countries? Yeah, well, I'm not an expert on those questions. Well, let's see where Brian goes before I get ahead of myself. Yeah, that has to be studied. Was that pre-Zionist rule? You know, was that pre-1948? And Carlos, what year is the UN formed? 1948. As this Zionist entity, anti-human, anti-Jewish, anti-Muslim, an underling of U.S. imperialism is formed. What does that tell you about the UN? The UN is formed precisely in time to give its rubber stamp, undemocratic, you know, against the global majority's will, rubber stamp to the Zionist entity. But yeah, I've heard different stories, you know, certainly, of course. I'm sure there was all types of persecution. One would have to contextualize it and look at it carefully. But this point, you know, in the middle of a Holocaust is kind of weird. The flavor, the tone of it, but you know, we open-minded. How do I pronounce penis?
It's a penis dragger. That's
penis
one
dragger?
of the best names. Yeah, penis dragger. One of the most superior names in the chat.
I try to call it penis to get off the hook. What's next for Israel? A liberal reaction to maintain their grip on the colony. Pink fuzzy. Yeah, no.
I think it's penis dragger now.
Comrade penis dragger. Very astute observation. What did they give us in 2008? George Bush, you know, George W. Bush was so hated internationally. Our demonstrations, Carlos. Where was Carlos in 2003? Kindergarten.
Yeah.
You were studying your first kindergarten philosophy text. So
I was stealing toys, man. That's what I was doing. I stole so many toys in kindergarten.
Yeah, we were consistently hundreds of thousands in DC from 2003 to 2005, 2006. The Obama effect. Oof, the anniversary of the invasion of Iraq in March 2008, when Obama, took the mantle of being the CEO of U.S. imperialism. We went from hundreds of thousands to 1,200 people or something. So what Comrade Penis Dragger says is right on point. But, the liberal reaction would put some type of human rights, humanitarian language breaks on what's happening. Israel's such a, they always the capitalists make fun of the DPRK, what they call North Korea, as a hermit state. But try to find, if someone could help us find, what are they saying about casualties of IDF invaders of Gaza? We don't hear anything. There was one, I don't know all the details. Someone can help us out. Maybe you do, Carlos. There was one incident, was it in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, where someone opened fire, I think, on 2 or 3 people. And then the police intervened, the police responded and killed another Israeli. And I don't know, I was just reading some of it. But I wanted to make that sociological observation. Like, I predicted a month ago, a lot of desperate lone wolf attacks. Of course, the media will just call them terrorist attacks in the most decontextualized way, in the most Islamophobic way. That's what they want. Just like they want to draw in Iran, they want to provoke whatever type of suicide bomber in any metropolis, of an exploiter nation. And then the headlines are going to be what? And then they can genocide away. So I'm surprised. Carlos, I'm very surprised. I mean, they've escaped like unscathed. And you can't find a headline about any Israeli death anywhere. They just go back to October 7th, Team Orca, let the Palestinians rule over the land. Marius says there's a good documentary on Matzpen, an anti-Zionist left-wing organization in Israel. Oh, for sure. And shout out to help us out with the names. The member of the Knesset who was suspended for 45 days. He's got Marxist ideology. He's to the left of Gideon Levy. I think when I was going back with Brian's coming from a much more liberal, maybe Zionist perspective. I'd have to hear more.
Danny, do you want to show the video you had planned? We've built it up quite a bit.
Yes, sir. I was going to keep building it up.
Oh my God.
To take up space. Zionism. I shout my Zionism. I shout my Zionism. I shout my Zionism. I shout my Zionism. I proudly shout my Zionism. Because Israel was not made to take up space. It was made to create a place. Because it means never giving up hope on the Jewish people, no matter where we're scattered.
If it wasn't for Zionism, there'll be no state of Israel. There will be no
This is
self-determination.
gonna fuck the song up for me. I like this song
Jewish
so
people
much.
have the right
No,
to live
they
safely
stole
in
the
our
song and
native
everything.
homeland. Because as a Black Jewish
They didn't
DEI
steal the
professional,
skill.
I believe it's a progressive value. I believe everyone has the right to self-determine and be safe. Jewish people have a right to live in Israel. It's the Jewish homeland, and true Zionism can bring peace to Palestinians and Israelis. There are 195 countries in the world. One is Jewish. Zionism is knowing that we always have a home and a place.
Shia Michaela Ingram, my daughter, who was born in Alone, Israel. She's a dual citizen of America and Israel.
I shout my Zionism not only because it's the 19th and 20th century Jewish liberation movement, but also because it's a prophetic call for redemption from my namesake Isaiah 2,800 years ago in the holy capital of Jerusalem.
I proudly shout my Zionism in support of Jewish self-determination and because we too deserve a place where we can be free from persecution and discrimination.
Jewish people deserve the right to be free and to live in a safe, secure, and peaceful homeland.
It also means never giving up hope on humanity.
And that's why I shout my Zionist.
I'm Israel Chai.
Yo,
Why would you do this to me?
bro. Well,
Why would you do this to the audience?
Bro, you all philosophical out here. I want to hear you philosophize that. I was hitting you up because I was so traumatized. It's like so laughable.
Oh my God.
It's so laughable, but
Talk about false. That's where my mind goes. It's false consciousness. Ideology takes various forms. Ideology in the non-neutral sense, in the sense of a set of ideas that distort reality for the interest of a specific class. But one of those forms is false consciousness. And the Marxist theory of false consciousness is that a specific society, when it's structured and divided through class antagonisms, where a small group of people benefit and thereby need the vast majority of the people to consent to an order that they don't benefit by, you need to create false consciousness, ideological mechanisms that convince people to consent to an order that is fundamentally against their interests. And often what this consists of is flipping the real existing state of affairs on its head on the basis of a very superficial truth or observation. So Israel, the Zionist project, presents itself as almost like a national liberation struggle, as a progressive struggle. And that's this very superficial reality that has no actual substance to back it up. In substance, it is the child, as Kwame Ture says, of British, Western, American imperialism. But the appearance is one of progressivism. And what they're doing there, it's substantializing the appearance. It's treating that superficial, hollow, baseless appearance as the reality itself. And in doing what they're effectively participating in is an inversion of the world. They're making what is one of the most reactionary, if not the most reactionary place in the world right now. It's up there in competitions with the state of Ukraine, where Nazis, walk around the streets freely with Hitler and swastika tattoos. But one of the most reactionary places, and a place actively carrying out a genocide, they make that into a progressive state. It's effectively turning reality on its head, presenting you with a topsy-turvy worldview. So it's the archetype of false consciousness. And let's not even elaborate on the fact that most of the people that they tokenized were black. That means that, they might come from a long line of black bourgeoisies and the black political class and the black middle class that is not in tune with the struggles of the black freedom movement, not at least as black working people are. But I'm sure that's not all of them. Some of them have to come from working class families that are rooted in communities that produce the most revolutionary, the most anti-imperialist struggle we've seen in our nation, which is the Black Freedom Movement. The movement that gave us the general strike that overthrew the slave regime in the U.S. South and gave us the Second American Revolution, and for a period of almost a decade, some dictatorships of the proletariat in the U.S. South. Don't believe me? Go read Black Reconstruction from Du Bois. The movement that gave us the struggle against Jim Crow, against redlining, against the apartheid, fascistic state of affairs that existed in the U.S. South, that culminated in the Third American Revolution, the Civil Rights Revolution in 1964, that radically transformed the nation, the social consciousness of the American people, effectively giving us the conditions for the possibility to build socialism. How the fuck are we going to build socialism if our working class is divided by the color line? So we beat the color line. We beat the color line, and now we can have socialism thanks to that revolutionary movement, whose leader was killed when he was calling for an end to the basically genocidal invasion and war on Vietnam, and who was also killed when he was trying to organize workers on a multiracial basis and transform that political revolution that he had led into a social economic revolution, so that the gains that were made by the political revolution could be taken to its logical conclusions. So how do people that come from communities embedded in that tradition fall for this form of stupidity? It's false consciousness. It's an ideological operation where people are made to believe in things that are objectively against their interests, that are objectively wrong, and that means that the only way these societies survive is on the basis of systematically making people think of those societies in erroneous, distorted, upside down ways. The society, in order to survive, in order to continuously reproduce itself, needs to reflect an understanding of itself that is topsy-turvy. So that's what's going on there, at least in my view.
So many anecdotes come up, listening to how you frame it. Over the years, of course, in the decades, we would always march downtown New York, Midtown, and we would go by NYU. And NYU had a sizable Zionist student population, and probably not as sizable of an anti-Zionist Jewish student population. But when we'd be marching out there in thousands, I'll never forget this young group of young Zionist student women, and they would come out and they would hand us these pamphlets about how peaceful Zionism was, as they asked us why we wanted to kill them, and they would cry. This is a level of brainwashing and indoctrination and socialization. I mean, the historical parallels to what's been done in fascist societies. I mean, Israel is so fascist, and the overcompensation, how they brag about being the only democracy in the Middle East. Well, a genocidal democracy, apparently. So, yeah, that video, absolutely bizarre. It's so out there. It's like that classic slogan of let them destroy themselves. Just let them be. Their own colonial arrogance speaks for itself. I mean, that's what, going back to Dr. King, his leadership, he knew the moral outrage sparked by the reality of Jim Crow, the reality of the Mason-Dixon line. And when television got a hold of that, and that's where the censorship comes in. Sean King saying he's only reaching like 25% of who he was reaching. Sean King is the anti-Zionist CNN for us, and he's been in touch. The Palestinian journalists have gone to him. The Middle East is going to him. So this is a huge international question. The resistance is international. So let me share my commentary quick before I kick it back to you. I saw a lot of interesting comments too to respond to. Things are getting real weird, y'all. The indoctrination is real. This is beyond sick. Capitalism and miseducation produces extreme mental alienation. Israel represents individualism, greed, and manifest destiny of racism. You have forever traumatized humanity in the spirit of your grandparents' executioners 3 generations ago. The ancestors stand with the oppressed underdog, disgusted with their bastard Zionist offspring, manipulated by U.S. imperialism.
On the money. So
that's criminalized, though. Like a lot of things we're saying, the House of Representatives criminalized it.
Yeah, we covered that yesterday. None of the squad voted against it. The one Palestinian member in Congress voted present. And when you look at the justification she gave for voting present, it makes no sense, because according to the justification for voting present, that should have only made her vote against it even more. It had to come down to Thomas Massey from Kentucky, the only person to vote against it. Absurd. Republican from Kentucky.
Break down why. I couldn't figure out Thomas Massey's position. Where's he coming from?
Well, I covered it in yesterday's stream, but let me pull up the link and I can show you that. Let's see where the fuck. Here it is. So Tlaib says she didn't vote in favor of the resolution because it ignores the existence of the Palestinian people and brings us no closer to peaceful coexistence. The resolution states that Jewish people are native to the land of Israel without mentioning that the modern state was founded mainly by recently emigrated Jewish Europeans who drove over 700,000 native Palestinian Arabs out of the land in 1948. So that's just more reason to vote against it. Not in favor of the president.
I wonder if she did it somehow thinking that that message would be more strategically received somehow. I don't know what her political team, they're on the retreat. I mean, is that's the statement that needs to be said. Why wouldn't she say it? Where are you reading from? It's not the New York Times, certainly.
The piece from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com.
And what was
Massey voted against it, not because he doesn't like the part where it reaffirms Israel's right to exist, but because equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism is deplorable, but expanding it to include criticism of Israel is not helpful.
So he was principled on some level. I mean,
some level, yeah.
I wonder how.
It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to the so-called democratic socialists that a Republican from Kentucky had the balls to vote correctly, and they didn't. The most they were able to produce was a vote present, which is the same thing AOC voted for with the Iron Dome funding.
You know the analogy of you organize a big party and party's amazing and it's 4 a.m. and then eventually you have to wake up the next day and you look around like what the party was like. The smoke hasn't cleared. We're living through history. We're always living through history, but this is this is a watershed moment. I mean, this is a break, a rupture, morally, historically. I haven't heard the word. How much do we hear the word multipolar in the last 54 days?
Not often.
Whatever multipolarities, it's just got a long ways to go when you can still, with impunity, with the utmost arrogance, unimpeded, unchallenged, commit a holocaust of native people like it was 1620. The pilgrim marauders are loose in the Middle East like it was 1492. You know how many millions of Zionists on the loose like it's 1492.
I wanted to go to the next story. We have quite a few more lined up for the day. Actually, the Commerce from the Fine Arts Revolution, I'm gonna pull up the story you wanted me to cover on PSL after, but there's a few of these that I want to pull up. This is a tweet from Abby Martin citing the 972 magazine, and here's a quote from an Israeli intelligence who admits that nothing happens by accident and everything is intentional. So when you hear the Zionists tell you, people like Ted Cruz, people like Anthony Blinken and others, when you hear them tell you Israel does everything it can to not target civilians. Israel has never targeted a civilian, as RFK and others are fond of saying. This is Israel intelligence itself admitting nothing happens by accident. When a 3-year-old girl is killed in a home in Gaza, it's because someone in the army decided it wasn't a big deal for her to be killed, that it was a price worth paying for in order to hit another target. We are not Hamas. These are not random rockets. Everything is intentional. We know exactly how much collateral damage there is in every home. They're admitting that the 20,000 people they've killed, which is an extremely low number because there's so many people under the rubble that, it could be twice as much, easily more.
Oh, and the starvation. What grandmother could sustain?
It's so they're admitting it. They're admitting it. So the people that did I get to pull up the tweet, Danny, or was I just speaking without the screen up?
Oh no, there's no screen. If you could put it up for sure.
Oh, I thought I had it up. But the people that have the people that have just been reiterating this lie that Israel doesn't target civilians, Israel itself admits it does. That it considers its attacks so-called proportional. It's absurd. It's criminal. It's a violation of international law. It spits in the face of the UN and its whole purpose, the fact that Netanyahu's not being tried by the ICC, and that Israel's not being condemned on an everyday basis, and forced to stop. But so that's that. I have another story, but Danny, do you have any lingering comments on that one?
No. Comrade made a comment earlier about taking care of our mental health, and yeah, I mean, Palestinians don't even have that luxury. How could you even ask a Palestinian comrade, how are you? It's more, what do you need? What's the next step to support? And that last night's class, our 7th class in the Educate Against Genocide series, we covered the Israeli origins, the Zionist origins of Hamas. I heard you speak on this, some Carlos, I believe. The PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, was a big part of the Cold War, the misnamed Cold War, but the global class struggle. PLO was very connected to Fidel's leadership in Cuba and the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact countries, and the East Germans and the Palestinians trained together. Incredible, internationalism. And they were on the right side of history. And I forget where I was going with that point, but the mental health question is big. We all got to take the time we need to take. There's different, I have to disconnect, of course. If we don't disconnect, how do we recharge? But it'd be interesting to create that space. Oh, I was talking about the class last night. And the other part of the class was students who've been doxxed and harassed. And Comrade Ariana told her story this afternoon for the Institute on the YouTube. And it all started because she had a water bottle with a sticker that said Free Palestine. And they initiated a whole investigation of her and fired her. Carlos, is this real? This is surreal.
No, it absolutely is. It's a Twilight Zone level shit. There's a few things I have left to cover. Next, I want to show a video of a Palestinian studying in Cuba describing how she has been experiencing the suffering of her people thanks to the ongoing genocidal war against the people of Gaza. And this is from the comrades from Belly of the Beast. On this International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, meet Razan Mallah, a medical student from Ramallah on scholarship in Cuba. So let's give this clip a watch.
Soy Razan Maleh, estudiante de medicina en Cuba. Soy nacida y criada en Ramallah, que es una ciudad de la parte ocupada de Cisjordania. Desde el día 7 de octubre, nosotros también en Cisjordania hemos sufrido de tanto crimen, tanta violencia, porque allá matan también, disparan a mucha gente, echan bomba por donde quiera, roban casas. Yo soy una hija de un luchador que fue encarcelado por 5 años por defender el derecho de su pueblo. Actualmente yo tengo un tío preso hace 28 años. Fue preso a los 16 años con cadena perpetua. Y las visitas, solamente las hermanas y la mamá. Cada vez que yo veo esas noticias, sufro más por mi país. Me duele mucho ver mi país sufriendo así. Y estoy muchas veces estresada, no puedo dormir por las noticias. Especialmente si no hay conexión con la familia. Mi sueño era ser doctora para en el futuro salvar vidas y trabajar a favor de mi pueblo, pero yo elegí Cuba porque nosotros habíamos escuchado cómo es la vida en Cuba, cómo son las personas en Cuba, cómo es el sistema básico de la salud en Cuba. Mi familia me enseñó desde era chiquita qué es Palestina, cómo tengo que defenderla. Como soy estudiante de medicina y estoy tan lejos de mi familia, este es el mínimo que yo puedo hacer. ¡Viva Palestina libre! ¡Viva! Mi sueño en el futuro, que acaba ya, porque es suficiente lo que estamos sufriendo. Y los pueblos oprimidos tienen derecho a la justicia, tienen derecho de vivir en paz. Será un país independiente, que yo quiero volver a Palestina y ayudar a mi pueblo.
That's beautiful. And it should remind us she's from the West Bank. You know, we the principal target of this genocidal war right now is the people of Gaza, but we can never forget the insane inhumanities and the apartheid condition that Palestinians live under in the West Bank, where settlers just from Brooklyn show up and tell them, you know, you've been living here for 8 generations? Well, fuck off. This religious text says that I'm supposed to be here and the state has the power to enforce my claim. So get out of your house. It's my turn. And it's heartbreaking, you know, so.
Yo, listening to that's the first time I hear a Palestinian speak Cuban Spanish, and there were moments like el acento está fuerte. Sometimes her accent shine through, and then she would just hit that Cuban syncopation, and I was like, oh, ella tiene rato allá. She's been there for a minute. Yeah, I can't imagine, because again, I'm not, you know, Carlos, I'm not afraid to talk about mental health questions publicly, because, you know, we're only as unhealthy as our secrets, you know, and that's an important theme, to create spaces. And with the Institute, we've asked students, we've asked comrades, like, we can keep studying, but we can take 15 minutes, we can breathe together, we can, you know, we can vent. It's very dialectical. The practical, the organizational, the theoretical, not the liberal self-care piece, but the revolutionary, you know. And the Palestinians will be the first ones to remind us of that. I've been told several times to fall back and to reemerge once I've rested, and yeah, I needed that. I'm, you know, people can post in the chat as well if it's on their minds, like, you ever put your phone away, go into nature, you go camping, these types of things. So I feel like Carlos tonight is like the philosopher and the social worker, so I'll kick it back to the philosopher.
Thank you, brother. Yes, so the next clip I wanted to react to was from Professor Mateo Capasso. And this is a clip where he's pithily describing the process through which the imperialist West built itself up, a process rooted, of course, in colonialism, the transatlantic slave trade, and the most heinous forms of exploitation, oppression, and violence. Remember that quote from the end of Capital Volume 1. Capital comes into the world scene, dripping from head to foot in every pore with blood and dirt. And Comrade Capasso goes over that here quite pithily, and then connects the role that the Zionist project of Israel plays in that global imperialist system. And of course, as always, shout out to Rania Khalek, brilliant interviewer, brilliant person overall. So let's give this a listen.
You see, it certainly takes a lot of ideological propaganda to hide one of the most glaring facts of Western civilization, which is the slaughter of the masses of the global South always has been the prime industry of capitalist and Western civilization since the 14th century. Western values, I mean the weight of ideas that define the social relationship instructing our geopolitical world, drip in blood and dirt. We Westerners love to fill our mouth with words like democracy, peace, international law. We do it and it is normal. But what is not normal is how we pretend that these values are simply the outcome of progress, peace, and benevolence. No, these values literally drip in blood. The genocide of the Americas, Congo, colonization of Africa and Asia, 20th century endless wars led by the US in the Arab region and beyond, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, decades and decades of international sanction, and purposeful undermining of communist movements in Europe as well. All these are facts. They are not hyperbolic statements. These are facts that cumulatively allowed the American project to dominate the world.
There is the fact that, we know the US supports Israel for a lot of reasons. Why is Israel so central to the US imperial project?
The Arab region, in fact, occupied a unique role in the geostrategy of US imperialism since World War II, especially due to its oil wealth. Being a key natural resources for the economies of the imperialist countries, the best means to ensure their guaranteed access consisted in controlling politically the region. To achieve these goals now, the American project operated in close cooperation with two faithful social political formation allies, Israel and the Gulf monarchies. And this is where we get to the relationship between imperialism and Zionism, between the US and Israel. After all, how many times did Netanyahu show up with a new map of the Middle East at the UN? No, as much as ideological reasons are important, we always need to figure out the material premises of this relationship. Why does the US invest so much in Israel? Why does the US provide Israel with so much money to have free healthcare, while this money is not used to provide jobs and healthcare to Americans? And the same goes for all Western governments. This aid, all this money to Israel, is an investment in militarism, in war. So as much as the liberation of Palestine is a struggle against US-led imperialism, on whose behalf Israel acts as a policeman, an attack on Israel is an attempt to undermine directly the core interests of the US and its allies in the region. And it is so important to understand this passage, because all of a sudden, what do you realize? That the Palestinians are not fighting the Jewish people. This is far from reality. The Palestinians, as per history's mandate, are facing a structure, an imperialist web, in which Zionism represents a fundamental cog. You see?
Oof. I don't think you could have put that more pithily, in a more concise and precise manner there. And he's absolutely right. It's always been a question of political economy. Everything else is used to distract us or to convince the people into consenting into the real ends. And the bottom line has always been the same, whether it's with the Israeli settler colonial project or whether it's, with Nike. The bottom line in this capitalist system is always profit, always profit. Accumulate capital in the hands of those who have it. That's always been the bottom line. And we often talk about the first major US-backed coup in the post-war era being Guatemala and the government of Jacobo Arbenz. But before Jacobo Arbenz in 54, there was Mossadegh in Iran in 53. And that region, it's an extremely important region in terms of its oil wealth and other resources, and in terms of its geopolitical position as a sort of midpoint from the East and Asia and Eastern towards the West. So it's a fundamental part of the world that the imperialists have wanted to control and have done everything they can to control for a very long time. And that's why, we repeat these words. But it's important to understand what it means. What does it mean to say that Israel is a colonial outpost of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East? What does that mean? That Israel is the station out of which all of the operations that the U.S. wages in the Middle East, or most of them, a good chunk of them, it's the centerpiece, the foundation, the outpost, the place out of which the U.S. Can wage these operations and ensure that the interests of American imperialism are upheld in the region.
And amazing how that class analysis for us is the guiding light, the ideological lighthouse in our family members and our class. And, we have a lot of work ahead of us as hopefully the unions will show, like, those who lord over us, those who chase the capital and their executive committee that defends their interests, the Bidens and the Anthony Blinkens, they're not going to stop this. It's only our class that can stop this.
Absolutely. That's why, we covered it earlier, but I think perhaps one of the most important stories coming out of the U.S. struggle for a ceasefire has been the UAW's recent, literally as of today, call for a ceasefire. So that's that. I have a few places to go for my next story, but we'll keep it with the subject of Palestine, and then we'll switch to a couple stories that we have that are not Palestine related. But as I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know, we are back to our regular scheduled genocide. So the short-lived and violated pause of Israel has continued, and this just shows the futility of the pause. It's good that they got a little bit of breathing room, but what does it mean to have a pause where you know that in 4 or 5 days the bombs are going to keep dropping over your head, kids are going to continue dying at a rate of 40 to 50% of all of the deaths that are we're seeing out of Gaza. So a pause to a genocide like that, how dystopian of a world do you have to be in? Can you imagine, an agreement with Hitler to stop the genocide of Jewish people for 4 days? Like what? Okay, but what's the outcome here? Are we actually trying to stop this genocide, or just pause it or delay it? Like, so the regular scheduled genocide has returned. As Richard Medhurst puts it in the following clip. Let me see if I can pull it up. More than 100 people have already died since 7 a.m. So less than 24 hours.
And those numbers are questionable. Those are just confirmed deaths, but I hear you.
Yeah. And this was a tweet from like 4 hours ago, so the numbers are probably way a bit higher now.
Who's counting? Who's counting people who have been dehydrated? The Gaza Health Ministry is barely mobile at this point. Some of them have been murdered. We're watching our heroic journalists that we become so connected to, thanks to Sean King, and I forget all the other influences, but I'm hoping some more of them. Like Black Lives Matter and different movements pick this up. It's got to go more liberal. It's got to go a little more mainstream. We got nothing in the mainstream really right now. The Weekend donated what was it, like 3 million meals?
Yeah.
But what's 3 million meals with an Israeli blockade? I mean,
right.
That's the liberal charity model, which even without a blockade is very faulty. But of course that would come as some type of godsend, and it's not like Sisi, the dictator in Egypt, is cooperating. He's aligned with the axis of genocide.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, even very moderate folks, people who definitely toe the line of empire on 90% of things or 95% of things, people like Mehdi Hassan, What happened to him just because he's been critical of the Israeli state over the last 50 some days, and before that as well. But he's not critical in the way that we are. He doesn't understand structurally the role that Israel plays for U.S. imperialism, because that would force him to also be critical in these other areas, not just with the question of Palestine. But even this very mild liberal critique of Zionism, of Israel, of this ongoing genocide, is censored. They just removed the show that he had on MSNBC, I believe. So it's getting to a very scary point, Danny. And I mentioned this last stream, but I had an interview with Rick Sanchez earlier this week on the topic of censorship and the repression of the state, specifically with the question of Palestine. And they mentioned that the state is going to start cracking down on students that are protesting in favor of a ceasefire. And the question is, when we look at the statistics of the people in favor of a ceasefire from 18 to 35 years old, we're talking 80-something%. And that's the age range of the people in college. So if you got a state that's saying that they're going to repress people showing solidarity with Palestine, or that have some sense of sympathy for the Palestinian plight, and the people in that age range in college are 80-something% in favor of the Palestinian plight, what's implied there is that most college students are going to be repressed in some form. So, there was a question here that arose, not this one, there was another one from Blade on, do we see a new Red Scare coming? Absolutely. This was a topic I talked about yesterday. We put out the highlight. We put out 13 highlights from the last stream a couple of days ago. And what I think makes our situation new is the fact that whereas in McCarthyism and the other Red Scares during the First World War, the people that were dissenters, that were going against the grain, were a minority. They were a minority. Today, I don't think the forces of dissent, I don't think the U.S. has ever seen forces of dissent as large as the ones we're seeing today, especially amongst the youth. And that makes repression a little bit more difficult. It's easy to repress a minority in a population and have the rest of the population that doesn't agree with them turn the blind eye. It's harder to successfully repress and coerce when the group that you're coercing is the vast majority of society. So that creates a new level of profundity and depth to the repression. They're going to have to repress more, and things can't change. The material conditions that people are in are what are moving them to these points where they're able to make these connections between their plight and their struggles here at home and the plight of the Palestinians, and connect the ruling class responsible for each. And the conditions that they're in right now are not going to be improved within the existing social system. It's impossible. It is, literally impossible for them to improve unless there's a social revolution. So the ruling class, I think, is in deep shit, and it's going to be an interesting decade that we're going to walk into.
The contradictions are extremely heightened. There's also such super alienation among our class. I work with youth, not just the college students, but I teach boxing in the Bronx, and I was talking to a bunch of 16-year-olds, and sometimes Carlos is had teachers and mentors. Like, of course, we got favorite students, the students who bring the passion that mirrors who we are. I mean, those are going to be our favorite students. I mean, come on. I have a class where it's like 3 or 4, really dedicated, and they're hungry, and they, at this point, they understand the Palestinian struggle, and other students are like checked out. So who are going to be my favorite students? Nonetheless, these are 16-year-olds. These are 16-year-olds in a boxing group I have in Carlos. They, when the stuff first broke out, I let one of them know. I had to let him know. I was like, yo, you my little homie, known you for a few years. and I broke it down to them. And that's tough. That's tough for a 16-year-old. And then they said, they came back to me, and they, on Thanksgiving Day, they told me they felt obligated to let their family know. I mean, this is heavy, heavy stuff, because we've come of age with the Holocaust as a historical reference point, a moral reference point, a big part of our socialization from AP US history to the 7th grade to, as Americans, as Jewish Americans. And these are interesting things to look at. So we have to, like Bob Marley reminds us, teach the children the truth. But I swear, Carlos, like liberalism, more people are offended that we would charge, like Malcolm X and Paul Robeson, they charged the U.S. with genocidal campaigns against Black America. And they went to the UN. People are more offended by our charging genocide than the concrete reality of genocide. I mean, what water does Gaza have? It's all PR from Israel, this trickle of pathetic aid trucks, when the UN workers are just killed.
Absolutely, brother. That's right on the money. I wanted to bring up a video from our comrade Nick Cruz from RBN. This is a video from Hotspot, and let me pull it up. Why do I keep thinking that I'm sharing screen when I'm not? So here's Nick Cruz from RBN, TikTok, doing a TikTok video for Hotspot, describing a study that says that Israel knew about what would happen in October 7th a year before. And I want to point everyone to something else before we show Nick's video. I wrote a piece a couple of days after the Al-Aqsa flood started, and this is how I concluded. It is difficult to imagine that Israeli intelligence was truly caught by surprise. It is plausible to suspect that they have allowed events to play out so that they may intensify the genocidal war against the Palestinians while using atrocity propaganda to legitimize their efforts. This does not change, however, the fact that Palestinians are up in arms fighting for their freedom. Neither does it change the fact that, like the all hubris-filled Goliaths, this apartheid colonial state, as we currently know it, may fall. So this was, before any of the studies came out showing that Israel was told by the CIA, by Biden, by Egypt, that the Al-Aqsa flood was happening. But now it's even worse, because it's showing here,
the hospitals,
as Nick is about to tell us, they've known this for quite a while, for more than a year. So let's listen into Nick.
So apparently, Israel knew about a potential Hamas attack over a year ago. Netanyahu has some explaining to do. In a 40-page document codenamed Jericho Wall, it was outlined in great detail exactly how Hamas planned to launch their attack. Israeli military officials blew it off, though, because they believed that the plan was aspirational and they believed that Hamas could never actually pull it off. Hold up, let me get this straight. Israel will have us believe that Hamas is all-knowing and all-powerful, has control of all the hospitals, control of the UN, control of journalists, but they can't execute a simple military operation. I don't know. To me, it seems like Israel wanted this to happen so they can have an excuse to slaughter a bunch of Palestinian children. I need someone to explain to me why we would give Israel the benefit of the doubt at this point. This is an embarrassing revelation because the Israeli government is even losing their own settler colonial people. After being faced with corruption trials, after facing mass protests last year, this was Benjamin Netanyahu's moment to lead the Israeli people on glorious conquest against the Palestinians, and his approval rating is 4%. Bruh, George W. Bush Jr. had an approval rating over 85% after 9/11. If you're a leader, a disaster like this is supposed to help you. Now Israelis are about to learn that Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel knew about potential attack and did nothing. Now just wait until Israelis learn about all the citizens that was killed by their own government on October 7th.
Why is it, Danny, that before these studies come out, why is it that us, the Marxist-Leninists, the communists, how come we can predict it? Do we have a magic 8-ball? Where's yours? Do you have yours? I have mine under the bed. I hide it so that when the apartment people come in, they don't see it. I got I rub it a little bit at the top, and then I shake it, and it tells me this is going to happen in the next few months. No! It's because we have a systematic analysis. We understand the system. And because we've seen it work before, it has certain structural laws. Because we understand those laws, we can have a certain degree of prediction about how they're going to continue functioning. So without Marxism, you might be right here and there. You'll have what the Greeks would call right opinion. You won't have knowledge. You won't have the confidence that you would be able to reproduce that knowledge. So what are your thoughts, Danny?
I always make that reference to my students about the crystal ball because I do this activity, been doing it for 2 decades, and I say, I have an ideological crystal ball. I'm going to tell you one word, and then I want you to just write down whatever comes to your mind in your notebook, if students still use notebooks. And I say, I'm going to predict what you're going to say. And then I go, Cuba, and 99.5% of students are going to write negative communism, dictatorship, Cuban cigars, the stereotypes. And that's the crystal ball that you speak of. We know how the class enemy miseducates our class. So that's a sample. As much as it hurts, from Manhattan, from the Bronx, from Queens, very difficult that someone would ever have a sense about Cuba's education. Of course, there's exceptions, you know. And then I say Haiti, and the students say, you know, hunger and gangs and kidnapping and coups and horrible things. So yeah, the conditioning is deep, and we have to understand that conditioning and push back. With the hospitals, you know, incredible video by RBN. They do amazing work. I've been an admirer for a while now. Why does Israel attack hospitals? It's the infrastructure of a society. You've taken out the housing, so people try to flee to schools, hospitals. You take that out. Like, this is not a quote unquote normal, whatever the hell that means, standard, whatever the hell that means, refugee situation. This is a genocidal, you know, refugee situation with no way to escape. Because in the beginning, I was making parallels to Fallujah. The U.S. military massacred thousands and thousands of Iraqis in Fallujah, in Mosul. But people could retreat, people could hide. What is this? What is this? You know, if this is not a Holocaust, what is it? And if Netanyahu's approval rate is 4%, I mean, but you read the Israeli newspapers and the war fervor. So I don't. That's a bit misleading, because the war fervor is over the top.
Absolutely. I like this comment here from Yellow Like Parenti. Marxism is crazy because it's so objectively true. The vast majority of people are kept ignorant of it, like being Galileo opposing geocentrism, but for the 21st century. Yeah, reminds me of the famous quote from Three Sources and Three Component Parts of Marxism. A great short introductory text by Lenin, a few pages long. How does he start that text? If my memory doesn't fail me. He starts it by saying that Marxism is omnipotent because it's true. What does that mean? That its source of power is rooted in its ability to correctly understand the world. To put it in Leninist terms, to reproduce the concrete concretely in your mind. So it's still true today. That quote is still true today. All right, with that, let's go to our next story here. Have you? I wonder if you know this person, Danny. Oh no, this isn't the thing I was looking for. Let me pull
Let
up.
me comment as you call it up.
Yeah.
I'll just synthesize this time because I have a lot to say on this topic. What world event has ever showed so clearly liberal cowardice and the absolute lack of analysis? And, you know, I've tried to work some liberals' minds very, very thoroughly over time. And just, Carlos, I worked with some families over time. And I thought, because they were like, just like out of respect and love for me, really looking into this and trying to understand and be compassionate in the Palestinians and why they're so ridiculed and shunned. And you know what they told me over the holiday weekend? They're going to adopt a Ukrainian orphan. The silence is deafening. The silence is deafening. Carlos, I I was like celebrating that I moved a liberal from like, because like CNN's not, I mean, if Fox is the 10 on the genocide barometer, genocide promotion barometer, this is Fox. Over the top. Fox is pure Israeli tears and victimhood. CNN is at like maybe 9.2. It's so you think you're like moving in people's minds, and we just got to keep fighting, man.
Yo, God, that's ridiculous. And watch the kid they end up getting. Watch him be like filled with like swastikas and Hitler tattoos. What the fuck? Maybe Putin was right. Oh my god, that's hilarious.
It would be interesting. It would be interesting to go back, and I was doing this because 3 decades of training. I mean, I was out there real. I don't know how you experienced it, Carlos, but I was using the word genocide a few days after.
Mhm.
It was for me. It was the supply, controlling a nation's water supply. And then the Israelis in that silly video, you can't even take it serious, talking about self-determination, the most sacred word in the English language, that you would subvert it and invert it in such a vulgar way. And see, the thing about the Nazis, history turned on them. They weren't the victors. Right now, Zionism is on top. And I have an existential fear, like, how do they not, if the Hitlerites were successful, we would never know about the Holocaust. They would have described it like, I have a 15-second clip, if you'll indulge me. It's worth watching because they just fired this brother. They just fired the leading, voice on and yo, I want to talk about censorship, man. They fucked up my whole Twitter game, man. I can't reach nobody.
Shadow banning.
I was reaching millions a few weeks ago. How the fuck? Just want to make sure the volume's up. Yeah.
Last month, Hassan interviewed Mark Regev, a senior advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu.
I have seen lots of children with my own lying eyes being pulled from the rubble.
Because they're the pictures Hamas wants you to see. Exactly my point.
They're dead,
they're
Mark.
the pictures
Also,
Hamas wants.
But they're also people that your government has killed. You accept that, right? You've killed children, or do you deny that?
No, I do not. I do not. I do not. First of all, you don't know how those people died. Those children.
Oh, wow.
Last month, Hassan interviewed Mark.
That's why they just fired him. He's gone. Hassan's gone, but the denialism, man, it's a real. It's beyond the mental illness. It's a genocidal malady.
Oh my God! Yeah, absolutely.
What's
wanted to move to a next tweet showing, I think, something we all know about, but the spinelessness of the liberals. A lot of them that put on the mask of being socialists. They had this weird term in front of it, democratic socialists, as if socialism didn't imply a society that's actually democratic, as if every socialist experiment we've seen, even in the toughest time, wasn't infinitely more democratic than any other order we've seen in the past. But here's Megan Day, a editor for Jacobin. I still get Jacobin's little magazine. There's some stuff here that's good, but editor for Jacobin says organized democratic mass politics isn't easy, but it's got a great track record and doesn't involve mowing down elderly women with machine guns. Many on the Palestinian left, which is not a monolith dominated by Hamas, actually prefer it to terrorist attacks on civilians. So let's break this down. All right.
Whoa, who's this?
This is Megan Day. This is the editor at Jacobin.
What?
Yeah.
Yo. But I was just gonna say, as you brought up this theme, like the DSA has been in the streets. I've marched with some
Yeah.
comrades. So DSA has different orientations.
It's a large tent. It's a big tent organization. There's a lot of good people in there. But democratic mass politics. Danny, the occupied Palestinians haven't attempted peacefully to overthrow their occupiers and the people that forced them to live under an apartheid state. I feel like the same part of the wall that Al-Aqsa broke through, I think that might have been the place of destination that a walk in, 2019 or so, was heading to when people were killed by Israeli riflemen. And, some died, many of them were injured. So let me ask you a question. If you try your little democratic mass politics and it doesn't work, are you supposed to, just fucking roll over and hope that one day you can sing Kumbaya if there's enough left of you with your oppressor, with your occupier? Is that how, is that what being a socialist implies? Let's keep it going. Great track record. Yeah, democratic mass politics definitely worked to free Algeria and South Africa and Cuba and China. I mean, what are we talking about? In some contexts, yes, it's worked. Democratic mass politics worked in the U.S. to bring us the political revolution in 1964 because it had a possibility to do that. But when it doesn't have a possibility, remember what Paulo Freire said. Never in the history of humanity has it been the oppressed that picked up the guns first. It's always the oppressor that forces the oppressed into a condition where violence is the only way to achieve freedom. So this is ridiculous. Involve mowing down elderly women with machine guns. Where's the proof? Where is your proof? And these are the so-called socialists that come from the American empiricist tradition of, show me the facts, from the very empirical tradition that comes from Anglo philosophy. Where is the proof for what you're saying? Israel has provided no proof. If it would have had even a slither of proof, it would have been blasting it on every news media, and it hasn't blasted it. All it's blasted is stories about 14,000 dead on October 7th that are all done at the hands of Hamas. And then they brought the number down to 1,200, and now we know that it was helicopters and tanks, Israeli tanks, and IDF soldiers, or IOF, Israeli Occupational Forces soldiers, that killed the vast majority of people, and that the vast majority of the people that Hamas did kill were IDF people. So they weren't just civilians. And that a good chunk of the civilians that were killed with Hamas were killed by the IDF. We've covered these stories. So where is your proof here? You're just reiterating the propaganda that dehumanizes the Palestinian people and the forces that they have chosen to represent their struggle for liberation through the means of weapons, which is Hamas. Many on the Palestinian left. The Palestinian left is fighting alongside of Hamas. The Palestinian left is fighting alongside of Hamas, which is not a monolith. Actually prefer it to terrorist attacks on civilians. That's bullshit. That is bullshit. You're reiterating the imperialist atrocity propaganda used to dehumanize the Palestinian people and justify this ongoing genocide. And it's a fucking shame that someone like you gets to edit a fucking magazine that calls itself socialist, that has millions of fucking people following it. Why is it that socialism that's allowed? Why is it that socialism that's allowed to take the algorithms by storm and get millions of viewers and millions of subscribers and millions of followers on Twitters and why is it that socialism that the empire accepts? It's because it always dances the tune of empire when it actually matters, but from the so-called left and with bullshit left terms like democratic mass politics, Palestinian left. Get the fuck out of here. You're stooges of empire from the fucking left. You're left delegitimizers of the anti-imperialist and heroic struggle of the Palestinian people. You are scum. You are fucking scum.
Yeah, Megan Day, I got something to say. I mean, when you read that, Carlos, I just felt like a certain class rage, the arrogance of the know-it-alls. You can tell what struggle has she been through to have such a liberal, disassociated perspective. It'd be good to debate, it'd be good to debate some of these people, because it's not her that I think we could ever win over, because clearly she has a whole lot of skin, as in white skin and liberal skin and white fragility skin and pro-imperialist propaganda skin in the game. But there's people around her, Malcolm X taught, never judge somebody on what they do or do not know. Don't forget, 5 years ago, you didn't know what you know. And I'm sure there's, like you said, 1.5 million people reading this. In my day, it was the ISO, the International Suburban Organization, these corny activists, on Ivy League campuses critiquing Cuba, critiquing the Bolivarian Revolution, because Carlos, they never had to scrounge up the last change in the couch to see if they could get on the MTA on the train. They never had to hustle. They never on the grind. Their class instincts, they don't feel any urgency.
And once again, to bring it back to the magic 8-ball, we've been predicting this from the start. This whole article is a refutation of Day and many others like her on the left that might write nice articles about Nat Turner and John Brown and the Algerian anti-colonial struggle. They might even condemn people like Albert Camus, who took the both sidesism approach to the question of Algerian freedom and anti-colonial struggles. But when it happens today, in front of their fucking eyes, they attempt to be neutral on a moving train, which, as Howard Zinn teaches us, is impossible. So this whole article is an attempt to expose the hypocrisy of this purity fetish left that wants a pure, peaceful, violence-less revolution, and God forbid the idea of liberation that they have in their head is not lived up to by people. Oh, they're going to be condemned real quick. Especially, the most difficult part of it is that if the premises that they were working through in order to condemn reality on the basis of it not meeting their pure ideals, this purity fetish phenomenon, if the premises they were working through were correct ones, okay, but half of the shit that's implied in her tweet is false. It's just pure imperialist propaganda. So these are people that are delusional. What does that have to say about Jacobin? What does that have to say about the tendencies that align themselves Jacobin when the editor is the person that makes the editorial decisions, the person that decides the line of the paper. If we were to submit a defense of Stalin, a defense of Marxism-Leninism to Jacobin, it'd be editors like Megan Day who would say, no, this goes against our line of so-called democratic socialism. So what does that say about this tendency when its leading people are being the archetypical example of this folly, of this ridiculousness of this moralist left that wants a revolution to look like a picnic, that wants anti-colonial struggles to look like a picnic. So if anyone's interested in reading this, I'm gonna put it in the chat. But Danny, your thoughts?
No, class instincts. When I was too young to understand all the nuanced debates between the real and the fake in history, between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks and the liberals, and back when I was, still young, 15, 16, 17, I just remembered these very, very white characters and white students, know-it-alls. They would go up to picket lines. This stuff is surreal, Carlos. The MTA had a huge MTA went on strike, Transport Workers Union, in 2006, December 1st, 2006. And these ISO, these DSA types. But again, we need unity right now. I'm not projecting any sectarianism against the entire DSA, but certainly whatever line this is, I mean, that's the enemy's line right there.
Our stream was just deleted off of Facebook, by the way. I don't know what are the root causes of that, but
that's what I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. How do you reach millions and millions, and then a week or two go by and you're reaching hundreds and hundreds? It's dispiriting.
Yeah.
And even when we were reaching a lot of people, we were an echo chamber. We were reaching our own people. It's only when they catch you slipping, that's when they come for you. But in general, they monitor us, but that's about it. I was
coming. The meta overlords censoring the truth.
So just the MTA anecdote. So all these workers, Black, Latino, super working class, Harlem, Bronx workers in the ISO, these DSA types, they would show up on the picket line and they would be like, so we have this newspaper. What do you think about socialism? In New York City in December is freezing. It's like 20 degrees, and these workers be looking at them more like these young college kids from like Columbia or NYU. And I was just like, whatever that is, I was young, I was like, yo, whatever that is, that's the antithesis of socialism. And their newspaper was like called the Socialist Worker at one point. I was like, the Socialist Worker. So yeah, Megan Day is embarrassing. We would love to debate her, and I say she's embarrassing. I'm not trying to be a unity monger like Carlos spoke from my soul with everything he said. But yeah, hell yeah, we would love to respectfully. Well, come on, at the end we gotta be able to get in a few shots, and they can call us tankies and shit, man. Come on, no hurt feelings.
Look, I got my weaknesses. I'm human. I still got emotions. They show themselves a little more when I drink, but I get mad. I get mad, and maybe I should have been more cool-headed about how I treated it.
That's not my critique. There's a time for everything. Come on.
I think the principle.
If we can't mirror the emotions of our class, right, who the fuck are we? What you said was the real shit. I'm just saying, and I came at her in a certain way, but we can also come at. I've been saying this.
It's a good cop, bad cop. Yeah,
we gotta wear different hats. Intifada is not gonna win over the liberals in the streets. We need to win over, and it's okay to say that. That doesn't mean that Intifada is not the 100% correct slogan for global humanity. So we have to show an array of emotions.
Flexible. That's
maximum flexibility.
we have one more story about Palestine and the return of genocide, the planned genocide. And then we're going to turn to another story about protests in the U.S. I have an interesting critique. I want to read from myself, from Comrade Marius, and from the comrades from the Fine Arts Revolution. But here's our next story. This is from the Hotspot. UNICEF spokesperson, emotional speech from Gaza hospital. So this was put, just hours after the bombing restarted. Let's listen in. This is fucking tragic, but
the ceasefire is over. We can already hear the. I'm at a hospital. There was a hit about 50 meters from here. This is the biggest still functioning hospital in Gaza. It's at 200% capacity. Yes, this is a hospital. The health system here is overwhelmed. This hospital simply cannot take more children with the wounds of. There are children everywhere. These children are sleeping. There was a literally 50 meters from here. I cannot overstate how the capacity has been reduced of hospitals in the last 7 weeks. We cannot see more children with the wounds of, with the burns, with the shrapnel littering their body, with the broken bones. Inaction by those with influence is allowing the killing of children. This is a war on children.
This is a war on children. And as Israeli intelligence officers admitted, a few segments ago, we covered it. Everything we do is intentional. It is an intentional exterminationist war against the Palestinian people that is killing anywhere from 40 to 50% children because of the Palestinians, the Gazan population being, 50 or so percent children. It's despicable. It is the worst crime against humanity we've seen in this century. And it is funded to the tunes of billions by American taxpayer dollar. Why our society collapses while you and your families do not have enough to buy the everyday things that you need to survive. Not even a gallon, a carton of milk was $6 today. $6 for a fucking carton of milk. It's insane. Inflation's going crazy. Our paychecks are at the same place they were in years ago. Our cities are crumbling. Infrastructure is shit. Small businesses closing every day. Life is harder to live. It's harder to get by.
Millions,
60 to 70% living paycheck to paycheck, indebted. While that is where we're at, our government uses our tax dollars to fund the fucking genocide. It's never been the case in history where conditions like these haven't produced a radical change in the foundation of society, haven't produced a social revolution. That's the slither of hope we have.
Yeah, I mean that report. Wow, we need to reproduce that everywhere. Is that Doctors Without Borders? I mean, how's he even surviving in there? I'm amazed people can get out anything. And this is one place to really do a critical comparison to the Nazi regime, because no journalist could get anything out under German fascism. But under the occupation, I mean, it's the informational war. They've shut down, Sean King is getting virtually shut down. How do we continue to push back? Because like Fidel said, the battle of ideas. How do we prosecute this battle of ideas? The censorship is dispiriting. We're getting attacked. In my places of work, like a lot of the academics, they're either afraid they don't get it, or they downright flat disagree. And I'm like, well, you've known me for a few decades now. You think I'm making up a human Holocaust? But then it goes back to the fear. This is shown, Carlos. We interviewed Ariana today. And when I interviewed Ariana, I felt that Argentinian resistance. from the 70s and 80s, and the defiance. I will not be broken. You know, as the Irish say, you're not the boss of me. And Ariano spitting fire about, I mean, imagine being fired over a water bottle that says Free Palestine, and her colleagues saying that they don't feel safe around her. And then they're sending the FBI to other people's homes. Carlos, I mean, all this police overtime, it's our taxpayer money. And here in the Bronx and in Yonkers, what do we have, man? We just dangling by a thread. You know,
Right.
people just trying to get through the night, the extra few drinks, and man, it's rough out here. Fentanyl, overdoses galore. Thank you, Marxist.
And the comrade here, it says it reminds him of the Parenti clip. Yeah, Parenti has written and spoken about how not just the U.S. empire, but all empires in the past, when they're at the point where they become moribund, the empire ends up sucking dry the republic. It feeds off of the republic. And the people at home in the republic, their lives get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse as more and more gets invested in expanding and sustaining the empire. That's the last segment on what's going on in Palestine. I wanted to shift to one that I didn't have prepared, but that the comrades from the Fine Arts Revolution asked us to pull up. This was a protest that was done in Minnesota. You know, we don't want to mention the organizers because you know we have folks in our institute from these organizations, but a series of organizers went to a Starbucks and basically were reading off a script, having letting the workers know the current situation and the complicity of Starbucks with this. So let's watch some of this, and then I want to break it down and show you some of the comments from a couple comrades that I think they might still be in the audience. One of which is the excellent group of artists, the Fine Arts Revolution, and the other of whom is Marius. Unless Marius doesn't want me to show his comment, I haven't gotten his consent yet. So if you're in the chat, Marius, let me know if it's okay. But let's listen in for a little bit.
You know, as you obviously know, there's a genocide going on in Gaza, and over 14,000 people have been killed in the last 47 days. 6,000 of these have been children.
You probably also know Starbucks issued a lawsuit against Starbucks workers, United and Union, just because they put out a statement in solidarity with the Palestinians as bombs are raining down on their civilians. We're distraught by that, and we want to express solidarity with Starbucks workers, whether you're unionized or not.
Did you know that Starbucks former owner Howard Schultz, whose net worth is worth $3.3 billion, that's sick, by the way, and who continues to benefit from his time at Starbucks, even though he sold the company, was one of the biggest individual donors to the Israeli military? Money that he earned off the backs of employees like you went to drop bombs on kids in Palestine.
It's because of this that we all are gathered here today. We want to express deep solidarity with all the workers. We want to do what we can to end complicity with Israel as it illegally occupies Palestine. I hope that you will all unionize. And so I'd like to order end the genocide, please.
I appreciate it. I understand, but at least my message was heard. So I appreciate your time. And if you're willing to accept, I have a tip for you.
So that was the protest, and I have a question, Danny. I have a question. I'm going to pull up here what I shared on my story. Somewhat cynically here. Let's annoy the increasingly self-organized workers at Starbucks and call it an effective ceasefire protest.
Yeah, there was oh, you keep going. My bad. You keep going.
Here's the more serious reflection that I did. There's a couple others that we have to get to, but Only by getting more people on our side can our power be enough to get our government to stop funding and equipping this genocide. Do y'all think we bring more working people to the cause by annoying them at their workplace? As we've said before, not all protests are equal. Who are you being an inconvenience for? The elite funding the war on the Palestinian on the working people, the elite funding the war, or the working people that are the natural allies of the Palestinian forces. Without the people, we are powerless. Let's stop alienating them with childish protests like this, which objectively help the cause of those trying to sustain the genocidal war in Gaza. Like, these people aren't protesting outside of the owners from Starbucks. Their whole protest is just an inconvenience for the workers there. And we have to bring this to attention because it's not just one separate event. There's been quite a few of these protests that, you know, what's going on here? Are you trying to win people or alienate them? If you're trying to win people, then realize that your protests are always rooted in being an inconvenience for someone. Have that inconvenience be for the elite, the people funding this genocide, the people whose material interest is aligned with the genocidal war against the Palestinian people. Why are you doing protests that are inconvenience for working people instead of winning them over? If you told me, you know, it's one person, you know, you get people to go to different Starbucks, and it's one person, they go and they very casually talk to one of the Starbucks workers, and if it's done smarter, if it's done organically, but these, you know, a lot of these are activists that maybe they don't know what they're doing, but they're just reading off a script, man. If you're the person getting their order, and 10 of these cats have just passed by the drive-thru, which I don't know if they have the little time thing that like Burger King does, where they time you and then they penalize you if you don't get them out quick enough. But if you're trying to work, most of the people don't want to be there, and you got these cats coming in and reading off a script to you. Is that going to convince them to join the side of the Palestinians? Is that even going to convince them to be more militant in their struggle against their boss? Is that going to convince them to like the socialists, which should be the people that get these trade union struggles and elevate them to socialist class consciousness, that give them the conditions for being political struggles and not just direct economic struggles? No. I think it's counterproductive, and it's a shame that the organization that put it up, I think it's something that they're better than. I feel like it's something that if it was ran through the higher ups, it should have been snipped.
What organization?
It's.
Oh, we'll talk. My bad. We'll talk off camera. Yeah, that was bizarre. That was bizarre. I was like, because at first I thought it was like a legit protest. At one point I was like, is this a mockumentary? Like, is they, because like reading off the script like that, it's almost like canvassing. It's not a sincerity. It was a certain sincerity kind of lagging. Kind of a know-it-allness, barking down to a worker who after taxes is making $7.50. I mean, yeah, that's extremely embarrassing and alienating.
It's ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. I wanted to pull up here the comments from the comrades from the Fine Arts Revolution. Let me see if I can find them. Okay, here they are. Share screen. We got to get something akin to Joe Rogan's Jamie. Jamie, pull up the video. Jamie, pull up the Fine Arts Revolution Instagram story. So here the comrades say, unless the owner of the franchise is somehow on the other line, all this does is annoy service workers. Protesting is great. Protesting companies that are financially connected to the apartheid is great. But this is not great. The form, and I love this part, the form of your protest is how you are protesting. The content of your protest is what you're protesting and why. This is perfect dialectics. These two things have to align. In this instance, you need to look up who owns that specific store franchise and go directly to their house. This information is all public. This isn't raising awareness any more than doing it at their house. It actively harms the movement and will not win any will not win over any potential comrades. All it does is assuage egos and lull people into a false sense of accomplishment. Beautifully, beautifully said. Um, yeah, Danny, I sent you the organization. It seems like you're in disbelief too. And what it shows is, and I was talking with some comrades about this. If this was known by the higher ups and it wasn't snipped, there's something wrong in their Marxism. But if this wasn't known by the higher ups, then there's something wrong in their management of a democratic centralist communist party. So either way, there's something wrong. Either the party's not functioning correctly because it didn't know that this was going to happen, or the leadership knew that this was going to happen and didn't automatically, instinctually see how ridiculous and counterproductive it was. Which is, either way, it's not a pretty situation for the party in question. But yeah, thank you so much for those comments. I haven't heard back from Marius in the chat, so I don't want to be sharing his story without his consent. But we got to be smart, folks. It's not all just theory and political analysis. There's something called tactics. Understanding what are the best tactics to achieve our strategic ends. And you can't answer that by going back to a book. You need to have a certain feel for things. You're trying to win people. You don't win people by annoying them. And trust me, when you got 10 people, 15 people going back to back to back to back in a drive-through, reading the same or a similar fucking script, the last thing the person on the other line is going to want is to be on your side. The last thing, they might hate what's going on, but if going to a protest means being next to people like you, they're going to think twice before they go. And that's unfortunate. Don't be that way. Learn from it. I think it's a mistake. I don't want to take it to the point of condemning these people. Maybe they don't understand what was going on, but please do not do these sorts of protests that just alienate more working people and make you look ridiculous. Like the archetype of what the left is that was created by the right and, frankly, promoted by imperialist institutions and major capitalist foundations to deform the left and disconnect it completely from working people.
So, did I hear correctly that the woman said, "If you do this, I'll tip you" or something? It was bad, man. When I heard that, it was like, ooh,
right.
Ooh, maximum humility required. Like the moment that we think we're better than the people and we can cancel the people and we can talk shit about the people.
Let me throw some money at you.
Throw money at the people, like the class instincts. Yeah. I was just gonna close out, the creativity of our class. There was this brother in the streets, and one of the mainstream reporters sticks a mic into the crowd. But what about October 7th? And what about, he grabs the mic. What about October 8th? What about October 9th? What about the October 10th? What about the last 75 years? The spontaneity, those class instincts. There's some things you can't teach. That's why the petty bourgeoisie, they try to take over everything, including the socialist movements and many of our expressions. It's not genuine. Doesn't align with the contradictions of our class, and one can feel it in their bones. George Jackson called it the perfect love and the perfect hatred. But the last thing I'm going to say, so I just got to get some rest. But I'm amazed, Carlos, again, philosophically and morally and historically. I got some good colleagues out there, and these are like some legit scholars. These are some of the biggest experts on post-colonial this and that, and for them to tell me that they, and of course they say, I of course disagree with your perspective. Why of course, but they've known me socially and professionally. You got the Christmas party at the college. So my question is, you know me, you respect me, and I'm coming with all this, and I'm under so much attack, and you're so diametrically opposed to me. We're on polar opposite ideological, and it's a human question as well. It's humanism. It's philosophical. It's moral. It's spiritual. They don't stop to think that they just may be contradicting their own principles and their rhetoric. How are they sleeping at night? This is a society that, again, morally, spiritually, economically, bursting at the seams, bursting at the seams. There's studies everywhere. The polls everywhere that Trump's in the lead. And Carlos, what is our democratic decision? Lenin said every 4 years we come together to choose between who will be our oppressor for the next 4 years. Well, now it's who will be the genocidaires, who will be the Holocaust deniers for the next 4 years. I mean, what a perilous, perilous human moment. What a soulless moment. And, let's keep sticking together. Civil disobedience and supporting one another, and maximum, I think, unity. And like Carl, I think Carlos's tone is 100% correct. Like, we hope that these different entities can grow and learn, and I'm sure their intentions weren't bad. Like, they filming it and everything. Like, look at us. It's just a class question, and the whiteness to them workers on the other end, the most down and out. We don't work at Starbucks for the heck of it. It's all there is for us. And now now you go to a CVS, there's not even workers there no more. And I just came from the Bay Area. I never seen so many of them cars with no drivers. This stuff is.
That's crazy.
It's dystopian, but thanks, Carlos, for letting me hop on and all power.
No, thank you so much for coming on, homie. This was excellent. I am going to continue the stream now after Danny heads out. I have a few more segments to go through, and I'll interact with the chat for a bit. I'm taking tomorrow off from streaming, so I'll be back Sunday. But I'm going to take a 5-minute break. Well, actually, a 6-minute break.
Can I do one thing before you roll the video?
Yeah.
Just a plug. Sunday night, 7:30-ish. We're doing something with Telesur. Whenever we finish with Telesur, Sarah Flounders, legend, really a legend. Like, Sarah Flounders was in Iraq in the most perilous moments. Yugoslavia, Libya. So it's going to be Workers' World International Action Center in the Bronx, Anti-War Coalition, represented by the comrade Richie Torres. So we'll be chilling, we'll be building. Sunday night, if you can join us. Thanks so much, Carlos. Peace, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you for coming on.